Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John Strickland, Pinehurst Mayor. This is the February 9th, 2021 regular meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. I've called the meeting to order. I would make a note that we are operating in virtual mode today. If anyone who is listening wishes to make a comment about any item on the agenda or any other issue or question you wish to bring to the Village Council, you may do so by sending an email to public comments at vopnc.org. Public comments at vopnc.org. Those will be received by the village clerk today and will be read by the village clerk at the end of our meeting. The first order of business today will be reports from our village manager and village council members. So I'd like to first call on Jeff Sanborn, village manager, for his comments. Jeff, thank you.
Thank you, John. As is customary, or as it usually works out, I've got two things I'd like to comment on. The first is we are wrapping up our annual street resurfacing program for FY21. Work is currently being done on Monticello, and that's currently north of Morganton Road, and we expect that work to be moving south of Morganton Road here later on this week, and should be wrapping up pretty quickly. In this contract, it looked like we're going to wind up with about 4.2 miles of resurfacing completed, which compared to recent performance is pretty good. It's not as high as we had historically kind of hoped for several years ago. Back then we were thinking about 5 miles per year was a good goal. We have not been able to meet that due to resurfacing costs over the last several years, but it was a pretty good year, 4.2 miles. We do expect that as we kind of wrap up this contract, there's going to be a little bit of money left over, as is usually the case. Normally we're able to kind of reinvest that and go back and pick up more road sections that we can resurface. I'm not sure if the pot of money available this time is really going to make sense for us. We're probably talking about something in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $150,000. It may be more appropriate for us just to roll that forward into next year's resurfacing plan. Not as a subtraction of what we would otherwise do, but as an additional contribution for next year's plan. So more to follow on that, I'm sure. The second is, I'd just like to call attention to the fact that we have our virtual public workshop associated with our small area plans at 6 o'clock on Thursday evening. Pretty good news here. We have, as of earlier today, 88 participants that are signed up for that public workshop. That's a pretty good turnout. And for members of the public that still wish to participate, if you go through our main public webpage, vopnc.org, you look on the events listing on the front page, you'll see a link to that virtual public workshop. You go to that link, there's instructions on how to sign up, participate in that Zoom meeting. That's all I've got, John.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Any questions of Jeff's comments from council members? Hearing none, we'll move along. Jeff, thanks again. I'll start with comments tonight, and I'll start as I usually do. We're obviously meeting in virtual mode, and the reason for that is the continuation of the COVID-19 pandemic. I know many of our residents have been able to receive at least one shot, hopefully two, but the situation remains quite dangerous across the state, especially with these derivative viruses that are coming around from COVID-19 itself. So I urge everyone to continue to be very careful, wash and wear a mask, and keep your distance until this situation gets under control, and that still may be a way off. Having said that, the efficiency of Moore County Health Department and First Health at the Fair Barn in dispensing these vaccinations has been terrific. And all they need is a lot more doses, which they unfortunately can't get right now, as we're all too well aware. But as to my knowledge, all the operations at the county level and certainly at the Fair Barn through First Health have gone extremely well. And I hope they'll be continuing to do that and that they'll get more doses in the future. The second part of my report tonight has to do with today's meeting of Partners in Progress. Kevin Drum and I attended virtually that meeting. Two things to comment on. First of all, Pat Corso announced at the meeting today that he will be retiring from the executive director position of Partners in Progress effective in May. A search committee will be formed through the directors, and that'll be ongoing over the next few months. The main presentation today at Partners in Progress was from the Department of Transportation, Division 8, the people that we work with here. And I'll just give a brief summary of some of the key things that they said, and I will be forwarding around the slides from the presentation that were given today, and I believe a video, in fact, of the whole presentation, which will be given to us as well. The first part of the DOT discussion today had to do with two organizations that are there to assist the state in studying Department of Transportation problems. One is called the NC First Commission, which has to do with funding issues and taxing issues related to DOT. That's been set up for some time, and it takes comments from the public and is reaching some recommendations on revenue grazing for DOT. The second special commission is called NC Moves 2050, and as you might envision, that is a program looking out to the year 2050 and what the transportation needs will be across the state in connecting both from a rail passenger point of view and certainly a freight point of view, all the major centers of North Carolina. But it was underscored in that discussion too that funding issues remain large for DOT, even in spite of the fact that they've done a very significant bond issue over the last just couple of weeks, I believe. With respect to projects and just hitting some highlights here, a lot of projects that affect us in Pinehurst were on the list of things that will be done. It's basically, I think, what Jeff received a couple of weeks ago and circulated around to us. But without tying all the dates together on it, I would just say that the Page Road 15501 Memorial Drive complex is on the work schedule, I think, still for end of this year, early next year in fiscal 22. Gun Club Road and Highway 211 remain a couple of years off unless they can be moved forward, but DOT does recognize the difficulties of that particular intersection. And a whole host of projects up and down Highway 5 having to do with widening on the one hand or turning lanes on the other is also there over the next couple of years, as are a number of projects on 15501. Now, all of that, the DOT recognizes these different projects has to be worked around the opens in 2024 and 2029. So they are mindful of that. And I think we have the opportunity to work with them even more on how some of those projects might be positioned going forward. I'd like to ask Kevin now in his comments to touch on any other aspects of today's PIP meeting that he would like to, and then whatever else he might wish to report, and we'll go on from there. Kevin?
No, the only thing I'd add is I think we were just dealt with the Baldridge process and innovation and strategic risk. They're understanding that they got electric cars. They're not getting gas tax. I mean, they're going to have to think dynamically and innovatively. And I think they're just at the beginning. There's no finalization. It's kind of neat that they're thinking dynamically. And the one thing I mentioned, John covered it well, is I mentioned that we were going to have a transportation planner in our planning department. And it was a Zoom call. And I think Lisa and Brandon were noticeably excited to have someone directly work with. I'm sure they like working with you, Jeff, but it's kind of neat to have somebody who's transportation. And so I thought it was a good time to, maybe they knew that already, but it didn't look like they did. I don't know. And I thought that was, it was visible that they took that really positive. And that's it for me. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Kevin. Judy Davis?
John, I'll pick up on some of your more sobering comments about COVID and just recognize the passing of Bird Glenn last Thursday night, a longtime member of the Pinehurst Village Planning and Zoning Commission due to complications of COVID. So sad day and important to remember people that have served our community.
Yes, indeed. Bird and his wife Molly, of course, are very well known and great public servants here in Pinehurst as well. Thank you for that, Judy. Jane?
Yes, Lydia and I both attended the beautification committee, which met on February 1, and we're going through their budget and their project planning for fiscal year 2022. They're looking at doing a whole series of new landscaping projects up and down Highway 5 at the Monticello intersection and at Blake Boulevard and Forest Drive.
Thanks.
All right.
We all right?
I'm sorry.
Lydia, is that you? Oh, great. Okay. And, oh, yippee. Okay. And also the stretch of Highway 5 between 211 and McDonald. And they're going to be coordinating with the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, which also was looking at putting sidewalks in along there, and DOT as far as turn lines and so forth. So that all sounds like a lot of wonderful projects that are going to add some shine to the village, and we're looking forward to that.
Jane, thank you. Lydia, reports?
Yeah, you guys, I'm so sorry.
Poor thing.
Yeah, no, this happens. It's just, why does Windows do this on a day when it's not appropriate or not very useful? I'm so pleased with how last week went with the National Park Service and the study they're doing. Thanks again to Natalie for working so hard to help the Park Service pull that off. I was really pleased with community involvement, the feedback we were getting from the Park Service. But John, I thought about something later. Not only has it been good for us to have this relationship with the Park Service, this nice relationship, but I think it was good for the members of the public who participated in that.
Yeah.
To have a positive experience with them. So all in all, I thought it was a good week. I heard some great questions from the public. I appreciated their involvement. So I think some good's going to come out of it.
I absolutely agree. I think we all do from council. Everybody was able to sit in on some of the meetings and hear public feedback, and it's a good process, and we look forward to their work and continuing on with them. And again, thanks to Natalie, as you pointed out, for helping to do all that.
Yeah.
We'll move on then to item number 3 on tonight's agenda, which is a motion to approve any and all the consent agenda items. I will first ask if there are any items within the consent agenda that a council member wishes to question or pull out for further discussion. Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion then on item number 3.
I move, oh, go ahead, Judy.
Go ahead, Kev.
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
A
Motion
second.
by Kevin Drum, and that is a second by Lydia Bosch. All in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes, and the consent agenda is adopted. We'll now move into item number 4, which is a motion to recess the regular meeting and enter a public hearing. Is there a motion?
I move to recess the regular meeting and enter into a public hearing.
Motion by Judy Davis. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Jane Hogeman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We're in a public hearing with respect to a moratorium proposal from the Village of Pinehurst. Jeff, I'll call on you for any introductory remarks you wish to make, and then I believe Darren will make a presentation.
That's exactly right, John. And this is a continuation of the discussion that you've been having for the last couple of meetings pursuant to a proposal to enact a moratorium that will allow us to do the proper diligence in updating our development ordinance and other materials that need to come up to speed with our comprehensive plan, and ultimately the results of these 2 small area plans that we're working on for Village Place, Rattlesnake Trail, and Pinehurst South, Highway 5 commercial area. So I'll let Darren make his comments.
Once again, Jeff stole all my thunder and all my good lines, so I'm just going to go right into my presentation. Hopefully you can see this. Let's see if we can do it. Can you see that?
Yes, sir,
Yeah.
we can.
All
And
right.
this is on the screens in Village Hall and Assembly Hall, I believe, too, if anyone is there, correct?
I would hope so.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Thank you. Go ahead, Darren.
Okay, so let me move this so I can be looking at the camera. Guess that's not going to happen. All right. So the moratorium ordinance the village is proposing is for Village Place / Rattlesnake Trail and Pinehurst South. Council is being asked to approve the development moratorium ordinance for two specific geographic areas. As you can see on the map on the right side, Village Place Rattlesnake Trail Corridor, which is focus area 4. That's to the north up here. And then Pinehurst South, NC Highway 5 commercial area, focus area 2 to the south. The proposed boundaries coincide with the comp plan focus area. So the areas that are being designated for this real estate moratorium are based squarely on the proposed boundaries on the boundaries that were adopted in the 2019 comprehensive plan. The length of the moratorium at present is proposed to be 9 months with 2 possible 90-day extensions, and we'll have some more discussion on that at the back end. And the length that 9 month coincides with the schedule for development of those 2 small area plans and the form-based codes. The moratoriums are permitted under North Carolina General Statutes 160D 107. Notices of this public hearing were published twice as required in the pilot newspaper, January 27th and February 3rd. The village itself, we've actually created, I don't know if I'll be able to link to this, but we created a page on our department, and you probably can't see that. We created it. Can you see that?
You have to stop sharing and share.
Okay. Stop share. Sorry. I have 3 screens. I'm moving in between them, so it's very difficult. Right here. So share that. So we actually created a web page. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
So we created that. We did issue releases on our webpage about the moratorium. So you can see the moratorium on our webpage. We have the maps on here. We have the time and date. Click here to view the meeting. We actually created a moratorium fact page, put the draft moratorium ordinance up there, and put the boundaries up there.
Excellent.
So we have been trying to be as transparent as we can. Now I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint slideshow, share, and we should be back in, right? Can you?
Yes.
Are you back? Okay, all right. Thank you. Bear with me. All right. Here is Exhibit A that's attached to the moratorium ordinance. This shows the proposed boundaries of the Pinehurst South area, which is Exhibit A. You can see NC5 kind of bisects the area. You got Monticello on the north and Olivia kind of on the south. Then Exhibit B, which is Focus Area 4. You got NC211 kind of on the north there, going all the way down to Community Road on the south. You can see Rattlesnake Trail bisecting that area. One of the reasons why we have some concerns regarding these 2 areas, you can see on both of these maps, this shows the existing zoning. It doesn't show the existing land use, but it shows the existing zoning. And you can see there's a number of different zoning categories in these 2 areas. And if you start to look at the comp plan recommendations, the comp plan recommendations do not kind of coincide with some of the land use and zoning that are located in these 2 areas. That's kind of the reason why we're moving forward with that is the reason why we're moving forward with the small area plans, which we're currently doing, and Jeff referred to the first public workshop. The purpose of the moratorium. Now, the purpose of the moratorium is not to stop development. That's an effect of the moratorium, but that's not what it's there for. The purpose is really to implement recommendations of the 2019 comprehensive plan. The existing conditions, as I just said, zoning and land use are not congruent with the comprehensive plan. So we have a comprehensive plan that's got all these nice recommendations that the community wanted to see and vision set up, but we don't have a PDO, we don't have a zoning map that's set up to implement those recommendations. What the moratorium does, it allows us to pause development for a short period of time to allow the small area plans to be developed with the form-based codes. And this is something that we're not sitting on our heels on, our haunches. The village has moved forward with a contract with Design Collective. They've been engaged to create the plans and they are moving forward with that. There's a public workshop coming up and it's being well attended as of right now. And the length of that moratorium, again, is something that's based in reality. It's based on the schedule that we're anticipating for creation of those small area plans. So it lays out the need, why we're doing this, and it lays out a definite time, what we're doing, and how long it's going to take and what we're doing. The need for the moratorium. The need for a moratorium is based on, we have an increasing development pressure in both of these areas. We're seeing development pressure throughout the community, but in these two particular areas, we do have some development pressure. There's some of it based on natural growth. The population in the area is increasing, and these areas are building out. And there's also growth pressure in anticipation of the whole USGA. So there's some concern that there's a continuing spotlight on what's going on in Pinehurst from that perspective, and that's going to add some additional growth pressure. On top of that, the developable land, as this growth rate continues, as this pressure continues, that developable land throughout the community in general, and in particular in these two areas, is going to diminish at a quicker rate. So if we don't get our house kind of in order with an updated PDO requirements and some zoning, we're going to continue to lose some of the, we have the potential to lose some of these developable lands, and we're going to potentially lose them to the vision which is laid out in the comp plan. Incompatible, the need for the zoning, and again, because there's a number of areas that have incompatible zoning and land use currently in those two areas, and there is incompatible development that has occurred. That was recently highlighted by the whole discussion that we had with the Pinehurst Cottages subdivision in the Pinehurst South area. That's a subdivision that moved forward under the existing zoning that is incompatible and with the vision of that area, and that's 14 acres of land that's coming out of that district. So, you know, we thought that there was an increasing need based on things that are happening, that we needed to move forward with a moratorium. And we'll talk a little bit on the next slide about some of those alternatives. So we didn't jump first to say, let's do a moratorium. We actually looked at it and we said, well, should we do some proactive zone changes? So we looked at that. We looked at it, well, what are we going to change the zoning to? We've got zoning districts that don't really align with the recommendations in the comp plan. So while we could move somebody from an NC to an OP or an OP to an MC, the base zoning district, the base requirements are not in line with the recommendations of the comp plan, and we're going to end up we'd likely end up putting them through two sets of zoning changes. So the moratorium allows us to kind of get through and propose and develop regulations that we can do that change hopefully just one time. The other alternative we considered, just starting formulating new zoning regulations, going down the road like we are with Design Collective, letting things move along. The problem with that was, our concern was, over time, with the growth pressures that we're experiencing, we might get more and more development proposals in the queue that are going to move forward before we can actually change those recommendations. And then, of course, there's always the do nothing alternative, and we discarded that because, again, you go to bullet number 2. We don't have the previous slide. The recommendation, the existing zoning and the PDO does not match up or align with the comprehensive plan. Now, when we talk about the moratorium, and there's this thought that all development is occurring because of the moratorium, that is not correct. There's a number of statutory exclusions that allow development to continue, and we've also created some local exclusions to allow a limited amount of development to occur. Our major concerns were things that add new building footprint that weren't previously planned out. So our major concerns are footprint additions, major site improvements that weren't previously anticipated. So from our standpoint, with the moratorium ordinance, we have the 5 statutory exclusions, and then we have the 7 additional exceptions or clarifications. And those 7 additional aren't, they're not totally new. There's some of them that are clarifying some of those statutory conditions that we just wanted to get more certain on. Because we're the ones at the staff level who end up administering those exclusions. So the statutory, we've been over these before. Any project for which a valid building permit is issued pursuant to 160D, any project, and there's a couple that are in the queue right now. I can think of 1 or 2 in Trotter Hills right now that is moving forward with some development. Any project, number 2 is any project for which a special use permit application has been accepted as complete. We don't have anything in that regard. The last one that we had would have been the ABC store, and that's done and occupied. Number 3, development set forth in a site-specific or phased vesting plan. We've got a couple of those out there. I can think of things like the Tradition site down there, was it McCaskill and Magnolia? You got the Green site, that's a site-specific plan. So if they could move forward. Development for which substantial expenditures have already been made in good faith reliance on a prior valid development approval. And I think that one we were getting at, there's 2 of them, we get at some of those developments that were already in the queue at down in Trotter Hills. We had some things already going through development, and there's a couple of these exemptions that we put in that kind of clarify that some of the development that was moving forward in Trotter Hills could continue to move forward. Then number 5, preliminary or final subdivision plats that have been accepted for review prior to the call for public hearing. The only one this really applies to that we can think of would be the Pinehurst South cottages that was recently approved in the preliminary plat. They can continue to move forward with their platting. Local exclusions that were added on, the existing single-family residential uses as regulated by the North Carolina residential building codes. That recognizes that there's areas down in, especially in Pinehurst South, where you have some homes along in the Jackson Hamlet area, where if you wanted to do some alterations, maybe you wanted to put a deck on, you wanted to do some driveway improvements, this would allow you, that would allow you to continue to move forward with those improvements. Projects undergoing technical review committee as of the effective date of this moratorium, that again clarifies some of the existing, some of the statutory language. And that was really aimed at some of those projects that were moving along already in Trotter Hills. Dr. Vieta Dermatology, I think the VGA had some projects going forward. And I think we generated 1 new application in Trotter Hills at 95 Trotter Hills for an office building. That is currently undergoing review. Number 8 would be alterations and repairs to existing buildings regulated by North Carolina state building codes. That's if I got a building in one of these 2 areas, that allows you to do alterations and repairs to those buildings. Those are alterations and repairs that don't add to the footprint of the building. I got an existing building, I want to do some repairs, I might want to pop in the window, I might want to change the door, allows you to do that. Site improvements required to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. You might be doing something where you need to add potentially a handicap ramp or add an accessible sidewalk. This would allow you to move forward with those types of improvements. Again, we're not anticipating anything, but we didn't want to hold something up because the ADA said you had to do something. Changes in occupancy or use of existing structures not involving building or site additions and not requiring rezoning actions. That's moving from these existing developed buildings, moving out from one occupancy to another, as long as it's permitted by the PDO and doesn't require a zone change, or you don't have to add parking or anything like that. That exclusion would allow that to occur. And then development and approved subdivision, which substantial infrastructure expenditures have been incurred, including roadway, water, and sewer infrastructure, regardless of whether individual parcel owners within the subdivision have submitted a complete application for development approval. And this was kind of geared at when we were trying to clarify some of that stuff going on down in Trotter Hills as in that approved subdivision. And that was one of the conditions that the village attorney and I conferred on and developed together. Staff recommendation at this time is that you move forward with the moratorium ordinance as proposed with the following clarification. I think we heard some concerns relative to some of the language in section 2 of the ordinance. And you can see on the slide what we're proposing at this point. No changes with exception to, if you go down to the second sentence, we're proposing to strike the village council consistent with the requirements of NCGS 160D 107E may renew this moratorium or extend its duration with 2 separate and consecutive periods of extension of 90 days each, which shall be effective upon council approval. What we recommend based on some of the concerns that we heard is we would replace that sentence with the village council may renew this moratorium or extend its duration as necessary, consistent with the requirements of NCGS 160D-107E. Of course, we all know that you cannot take action on this. You have to wait 24 hours till after the public hearing, I believe. So you can't take action on this tonight. And this is the end of my presentation. So I'll take questions. Questions.
Okay, Darren, thanks very much. Yes, are there questions from council for Darren? And then we'll go to public comments on this. Anybody on council have any follow-up questions for Darren at this time?
Darren, I have 2. First of all, there's only 11 exclusions. You had a chart that said 12.
Did I?
I wondered about that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm wrong.
Okay. And then I just want to go to the new language that you're proposing. We could take a look at that slide.
Sure.
So you're saying that the council can renew this or extend it as necessary. So not limiting it to any duration.
Correct. Correct. So it doesn't. The language that we placed in the proposed moratorium was consistent with previous moratoriums. So that was consistent with the new core stuff. We heard some concerns about it. That it essentially does the same. The language does the same thing because you still have to go through the same process to extend it. It just the language that we have in the original just sets up kind of that expectation that there may be a chance that we're going to extend it. And it kind of lays out, yeah, we're going to do it for 90 days. And if we don't have it complete, we're going to do it for another 90 days. So it kind of puts us on the time clock in that regard. Either works. Either language works for us. We can work under either one of them. Our goal is to get everything done within that 9-month period.
So I just raised a concern that I think this is a bit too open-ended. You know, I mean, rather than having us move with all due haste to make the decisions that are necessary. And that, to me, that was the value of those 90-day limitations. But
Judy, would you, I'm happy to explain why I suggested this. It came about when I looked at the actual statute, and when you get to the end of the 9 months and we find out that we need another, let's say 2 or 3 weeks, the statute makes you set forth your reason for getting the extension. And so at the end of the moratorium period, we will know exactly how much time we need, and it gives us more flexibility and then extending it for the required amount of time and stating, as the statute requires, that we're extending it for that amount of time. And the way it was written, it's a 90-day extension, even if we only need 30. So I thought it was more appropriate and more in compliance with the statute to do the rewrite. So then we give it an extension that matches what we think we need.
We still retain in that last sentence the right to terminate that moratorium earlier by action of the council. I mean, the thing about the 90 days is I think the optics on that are a little bit better from the community perspective. It's not like we are, languishing or letting this project languish.
Well, actually, I thought the 90 days might be, that's an additional 3 months. And I thought that might make the public a little anxious to see that we could give an additional 3 months when we actually might need just 30. So that was my reason, that was my reason for doing it, because it was consistent with the statute. And I thought it might calm some anxiety out there, knowing that we might extend this, looking at the 90 days, we might give that 90 days. And that was my rationale.
Maybe there's a way to to solve this by keeping what you have and somehow no more than 90 days. That's what you mean, right, Judy? I mean, I think it's going to be a matter of weeks myself. If it's,
Who knows, really, right?
Right.
but if you added that into that new sentence in some way, you're the wordsmith, you know, you're trying to make sure there's a dead end on it. And so maybe you could add it to this and no more than 90 days. Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, you know, you already have a moratorium for 9 months. And now you're presenting the possibility of another 6 months with 2 90-day periods. And I think that we want to move with all due haste to, you know, create the structure that we want. But I think that, I don't know, the open-endedness of this new language concerned me, but you still have the provision that you can terminate it.
Do you not think, well, Darren, let me ask you, at the end of the 9 months, you guys are going to be watching this closely. At the end of the 9-month periods or a few weeks before that, do you think you'll have some idea of how much additional time might be needed?
Yes, I think come, you know, probably, I think July-ish, July, August sometime. I think that's when we were anticipating getting into the review of the drafts. I believe I have for my ordinance. I think 9 months. Yes, we should know within a month of when the original moratorium ends, or within 45 days. I think we'll have a pretty good handle of that.
Yeah, and see, that's why I was thinking as we get on into this, we will have an idea whether an extension is needed and how much. And, you know, I think the public and developers, well, I don't know, I'm not a developer, but try to look at this through their eyes. If they see the 9 months and then see that, wait a minute, we could go another 3 months after that and another 3 months after that. Where at some point in this 9 months, we, according to what Darren's saying, we should have a pretty good idea of how much additional time is needed. And you know, that was like I said, it's two things: seeing 90 days, which is an additional 3 months, and then seeing how the statute was written.
Well, but the statute does have standards in it that we're not supposed to extend the moratorium beyond what's necessary. So I think the language that talks about the 2 90-day extensions with the following sentence, that the council should terminate the moratorium earlier if needed, is fine. I think the other way that Lydia is suggesting also works. I don't think either one of those acts to require more moratorium length than is needed. Sitting here today, it sounds like Darren's telling us that 9 months is his best educated estimate of how long it's going to take. And we are smart to put in some kind of a cushion in case something unexpected comes up where we need a little bit more time. We don't know sitting here today how long it'll be. So I think actually either one of the languages is okay.
You know, from my point of view, we need to have an ability to extend it, which either of these do in different descriptions. But the key is if we're in compliance with NCGS with 160D.
Mm-hmm.
And as I think Jane was just saying, there are other regulations we have to follow to be in compliance with 160D. So I think this change is fine because we can rely on what other regulations are in 160D. Isn't that correct, Darren? Basically, what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah. As long as we're in compliance with 160D, we're going to be fine. I just want to comment that I'm looking at the design collective schedule right now, and we might, we'll probably get a little behind at some point here, but the plan adoption phase, because that always happens with plans, the plan adoption phase is supposed to start in June, and it looks like they're planning on delivering the set to us as of the beginning of July. So that gives us some cushion, and actually puts that review and adoption on our shoulders to get that done once they've delivered some of those final deliverables to us. So I think once they get that to us, it's still going to be well within that 9-month period for us to review it. And then we'll have, once they get it to us, then we, to Lydia's point, we'll still have some time. We would still literally have some time to make some adjustments if we needed to extend out that moratorium ordinance, and we'll have a reason for that. We haven't adopted the plans. We're still doing the adoption. So I think at that point we would have the rationale to extend it via in compliance with 160D.
Yeah, and in either case, well, especially in the case in the red line here, we can make the extension for 30 days, 45 days, 60 days, whatever seems to be the case based upon what Design Collective has come back with and what work we think we still need to do. I think that's the main point here, isn't it?
Oh, and John, in this proposed new language, it says consistent with the requirement, should be requirements of that statute. And if you look at that, it says you have to state specifically why you're extending it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we would get into, we're just not on time.
Well, it's the same is true in the language you're striking. If they're consistent with the requirements of NCGS 160D. Both of those are required there.
Right, but the first one gives you the automatic 90 days, which I thought we might not need. The only reason, like I said, I did it was just to be consistent with the statute and to be more flexible give us more flexibility in the amount of time we are going to tack on to the 90 months.
Okay. Well, is there a consensus here on going with the new version or keeping the old version? Darren has expressed that either one is workable and consistent with regulations.
Can I just offer some observations, John?
Please.
I think it's good discussion about, public perception is important. If I recall correctly, that 90-day language comes from the old general statute language. I think that's what the way it was written in the, when this provision was part of 160A versus 160D. And it is curious that for whatever reason, statute writers thought it would be more appropriate to simplify things down to the language that more along the lines of what's in red there at the bottom of the page. I think from a practical sense, I'm not sure one version or the other is necessarily a better optic. I think if you look at the detail of two potential extensions of 90 days each, that's pretty daunting to the development community. It was, 9 months plus 6 months. Are you telling me this is going to be 15 months long? Right? I mean, right? We're getting kind of specific. And it's true that the red language at the bottom of the page does offer greater flexibility that might extend it beyond that. But it's also true that is the requirement in the general statute. And as such, we could go with the option with what's listed there in the original language that shows the 2 90-day extensions. And because the general statutes allow us, you could then turn around, if it wasn't enough time, and enact another moratorium. For the same reason, because the general statutes don't limit the duration that you can do it. So, from a practical sense, there's no real difference between the two, and I'm not sure there's a real difference in the optics either.
I'd like to. I like this language. I think it's clear, but I hear what Judy's saying, and to me, the order is interesting. And why don't you make this section 2? Is my mic not on?
Sorry.
Yeah. Why don't you make this section 2 where it ends related zoning and development standards, then put in the village council may renew this moratorium or extend it duration as necessary, consistent with the requirement of NCGS 160D-107E, period. And then adversely, the village council may terminate this moratorium earlier by action of the village council. In other words, it should end that we can the other way, and that might.
It is. We're leaving that last sentence in there.
Yeah, the termination stays in.
No, that's not. I'm talking about changing the order. I just changed the order.
I think that was the intent, Kevin. I think slide craft here, but what Darren described was replacing the crossed out language.
Okay. I'm sorry, it doesn't look like that.
Sorry, I was doing it on the fly.
Yeah. I think when you read it the way you intended, it works, but I'm adding a word, adversely, the village council may also terminate this, earlier. It kind of says that, we could end it earlier, we could extend, we're just, I was just trying to deal with the issue.
Well, to be clear here, the red line is to replace the
Yeah, I
black
know
strike
that.
line, strike through, okay?
I think
Got
So that's being inserted where the strike throughs are now in black.
Don't forget everything I said.
Yeah, I think we're all right on the termination, but it's a
I'm
good point.
sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm hearing consensus here to take on the new language that is in red.
I
inserted,
agree.
Where it's in the section number 2, where it's strike through. And to keep the last line, of course, which the council can terminate the moratorium earlier by action of the village council. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
And also, John, I mean, to Darren's point, the sooner council finds out about any necessary extensions, the better. Not to hurry Darren up, but and I'm sure he's going to be following this closely, but as we get into it and we find out for whatever reason, anything can happen within a 9-month period. But the sooner we realize that we might need an extension, the
All right.
better.
And
Sure.
Lydia, I do think transparency will help us a lot here if we're transparent through this process. And it's probably more about council meeting dates that could extend this than it is, the work of a consultant, right? Darren, possibly?
Well, I mean, everything is, we are keeping an eye on everything here. We're making sure everything's on schedule, and we're reporting all that. We put that in, we're putting activity in our weekly reports. We're doing things like that.
So that's going to solve it a lot, the transparency. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we have consensus then to adopt the red line version as appropriate and inserted where Darren has planned to do that. Are there other questions of Darren before we take public input? All right. Beth Dunn, do we have persons that have either submitted in writing or who are present in Assembly Hall to speak on this issue?
No, we do not.
All right, and I did not receive any comments either. So if I understand correctly, we have no individuals who have yet submitted any comments, and nobody's in the Village Hall waiting to speak. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Then I think we could move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting for further discussion, if any.
Hold on.
Is there a motion?
One jumped up.
Okay,
Colette Kalinsky wants to make a comment.
I didn't want
Okay.
to speak on that, so I didn't want to adjourn the meeting because I wanted to speak on something else. And that was, I will read some of this, that'll make it shorter. Last week, February 4th, 2021, PZ meeting was to focus on the tree protection ordinance development.
Well, this will only relate to this public hearing.
Oh,
Yeah.
so,
yeah, Colette, these
Oh,
comments
still-
are only for the public hearing, and we'll take comments on other matters at the end of this meeting. So I believe a motion would be in order to adjourn the public hearing. Item number 6, is there a motion?
I move to adjourn the public hearing and re-enter the regular meeting.
Motion is by Kevin Drum. Is there a second?
Okay,
Second.
Motion by Kevin Drum and a second by Judy Davis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are back in the regular meeting for the purpose of any further discussion on this ordinance. Are there any other questions or comments from staff with respect to this ordinance on a moratorium for Pinehurst? I'll go around. Judy, anything?
no, thank you.
Jane?
No, thank you.
Kevin?
No, I just had some calls and I want to say the obvious. This is a moratorium and only those 2 areas. I want to make that very clear to the public, only on 2 small areas that have someone working on. And I thought it was worth restating that. It is not a moratorium on the entire Pinehurst. Thank you.
Very good point. And Lydia?
I want to thank Darren for explaining it so well in his presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Darren. Well done, and we all understand this, I think, pretty well right now. As was stated earlier, because of the virtual nature of our meeting, we cannot vote on this issue tonight. However, we will continue the regular meeting, this meeting, until tomorrow, February 10th. And I'm going to discuss right now with council and the village clerk and village manager. It is now 5:33 or 5:28. I would suggest, subject to input from the council, that we set the meeting tomorrow for 6 p.m. I believe that was consistent with the availability of everybody. Tell me if that's not true among the council members.
That works.
And so my
That's great.
recommendation would be that we will continue this meeting until 6 p.m. tomorrow, February 10th, to allow for a 24-hour public comment period on the proposed moratorium, in which comments may be emailed to publiccomments@vopnc.org. At that time, tomorrow, council may take action on the ordinance under consideration. So we will continue the regular meeting until 6 p.m. tomorrow. Is that correct with the village clerk?
Yes, that's correct. That's good
Okay.
with you. That's what we'll do.
All right. Then we can move along to item number 7. We are back in the regular meeting, of course, and I don't believe we need to take a break at this point. So we'll go through item 7. There are no comments, and so we'll continue the meeting as expressed and go on to item number 8 in the agenda. I believe I have that correct.
That's right, John. And I'll just turn it over to Brooke, and she's going to cover our end of quarter financial update.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to share my screen for you. And like Darren, I also have 3 screens up, and so you'll have to bear with me as we work through this today. Perfect. Can you see my memo on the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. And so today we'll be discussing our mid-year financial update with a review of the financial statements as of December 31st, 2020. Mid-year is the basis for our budget process. We do use these numbers as our beginning numbers as we begin developing our budget requests. And so department heads use this as a tool, and they have already received all of our financial forms and budget documents, and they are working on filling out those forms for this upcoming budget year. And those will be due later this month. So the village remains in good financial position throughout the first half of the year, even despite the economic impacts that COVID has had on our economy. From a financial position, our general fund is showing net income of $5.6 million for the first 6 months of the year, and that's a little lower than $7.3 million seen last year. But the $1 million that was returned from the library was included in net income last year. Fund balance in the general fund is currently 74% of budgeted expenditures. That's a little greater than 69% seen last year this time. We have received most of our property tax revenue for the year, so this percentage will decline as the year progresses. Cash and investment balances increased by $451,000 or 3%. And of the $14.7 million that we have in cash and investments at December 31st, 14.4 of that was invested in the North Carolina Capital Management Trust government portfolio. You may have noticed the term portfolio, there's no longer a line on the financial statements for that on the cash page. In December, the Capital Management Trust decided to liquidate that portfolio with historically low interest rates. That portfolio was no longer beneficial to investors. So they have closed that. They did indicate interest in offering other options in the future as interest rates change. But at this point, we just transferred everything out of the term portfolio over to the government portfolio. Also, a bit of news, I believe Natalie mentioned this when she provided the last quarterly update. The village made an early debt payoff in this quarter. And as of December 31st, the village has no installment debt financing. In terms of revenues and expenditures, our property tax revenues were $643,000, or about 6.6% above our quarterly revenue estimate. And part of this is just based on the timing of when residents make their payments around the January due date, which quarter those payments land in. Our tax collection rate of 93.6% is almost 1 full percent higher than this time last year. Our real and personal base grew 1.3% compared to the same time last year, and that is in line with our projection. That is almost spot on what we projected. Motor vehicle tax base grew by 9.9%, which was better than we anticipated. For local option sales taxes, our adopted budget forecasted a 5% decrease over the previous year for the first quarter, and no growth or no change or increase over the remaining quarters of the year. But so far, actual collections for the first 4 months are running 8.9% ahead of the previous year. When we established the budget for the local option sales tax revenue, of course, we had no idea what impact COVID-19 would have on this revenue source, but luckily it has fared better than we anticipated. And from July through October, the actual collections exceeded our conservative budget estimate by almost $203,000. So that is a positive thing. It didn't impact us quite as severely as we were potentially preparing for. We did have a few minor revenue sources decline because of COVID-19 restrictions and some of our facility closures. The most obvious of that is the Fair Barn revenue that we'll discuss a little bit later. Recreation fees, athletic fees, and also event sponsorship revenue. Because the buildings were closed, a lot of the programs were not able to take place. And even since we've begun to reopen, as it was a gradual opening, we had some smaller program sizes than we have been able to host in the past. And also, with there being no events for the public, there have been no opportunities for individuals or businesses to sponsor those events. So those sources have decreased. But in a lot of those cases, those decreased revenues were offset with decreased expenditures as well. Operating expenditures were $1.3 million, or 14% below the quarterly budget. Differences of this nature are very typical at this time of year. Part of it is due to lapsed salaries, but a lot of it is just due to the timing of expenditures. Department heads estimate their expenditures on a quarterly basis, so they just do the best we can to see when we expect to spend those dollars. And obviously, there are going to be differences of some kind, but we typically fall lower in actual expenditures than we budget for from a quarterly basis standpoint. In capital outlay, approximately 56% of the budgeted outlay was expended in the first 2 quarters. And that's due to a couple of factors. The solid waste truck that was ordered by December had not been received, and so it has not been paid for yet, and it's not showing in our expenditure reports. Also, just the timing of the Magnolia Road streetscape improvement. Those were 2 of the larger capital items that were planned to be spent by December 31st. However, we do anticipate most of the other capital items that were planned for December. We do expect them to be completed throughout the remainder of the year. From a financial outlook standpoint, the village issued 71 single-family residential building permits valued at over $18 million during the first 2 quarters. That's compared to 89 at the same point last year. And you may recall we ended last year at 189 total new single-family residential permits issued. At this point, we do expect the village to exceed our forecasted number of 100 new homes. we have revised that estimate to approximately 150 homes at this point. An update in Fair Barn and Harness Track. Fair Barn obviously was directly affected by the pandemic with those state mandated closures. Staff did work with the health department though to reclassify our Fair Barn as a convention center, which allowed us to host some events with a maximum of 100 guests. And so that did allow us to host a few events during this second quarter. Total of 6 paid events were held. Fair Barn only covered 12% of operating expenditures because of these closures, and that's compared to 75% at the same point last year. Because of these closures, our balanced scorecard target has been revised from 99% down to 55%, and we'll continue to monitor that as the year progresses. Harness Track covered only 61% of operating expenditures compared to 77% the previous year. That's primarily because of 5 trainers who did not return to the track, and also a couple of trainers who brought fewer horses. I reached out to Mark to get some additional information on this, and he shared with me that some of this is because of some travel restrictions at the Canadian border. You know, a lot of our trainers have connections in Canada, and so that played a role. Also, some of the northern training facilities would not guarantee racing season stalls if those trainers did not rent training season stalls. So it was a way to hold them there successfully, it appears. However, luckily we did have a few additional soccer and lacrosse practices that have been taking place at the track. And that has brought in some additional revenue. Of course, not enough to offset, completely offset the revenue loss with those decreased stalls, but still helpful nonetheless. So in summary, council and manager should be commended for exceeding most of the village's financial targets, even during a period of economic uncertainty related to the pandemic. We will continue to monitor the impacts of the pandemic on our revenues and expenditures, and we have found that effects were less severe than originally anticipated. And we will now begin developing, as I mentioned, the fiscal year 2022 budget using this information and the new information that we have available. But at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have on the quarterly financials.
Brooke, I have a question to start with. We understand the lag in the local option sales taxes, but I thought I recalled starting in the middle of the year last year that there is some guidance from time to time that's coming out of state government with respect to what they're seeing, even though they don't have the actual results. Am I right in that, or are we getting any guidance on what might be through the end of the fiscal year anyway?
That is correct. The League of Municipalities posts a revenue bulletin each year, and they provide some quarterly updates. The quarterly updates primarily are historic, so they look back, but the revenue bulletin will be forthcoming probably at the end of March. And that is some guidance that we use when we set the revenue budget for the upcoming year. And so we monitor that and wait for that to come out to see what they see on the horizon. And I'll be happy to share that information with you when they release that.
Questions from council. I know there were some comments and questions leading up to tonight's meeting. So maybe we need to pursue those a little bit further. Judy, any questions from you tonight?
I'll hitchhike on your question about the local sales option. Although the average was 8.9%, it was very spiky. You know, up 13%, way up 4%, up 20%, and now almost minus 2%. Do you have any data at all beyond October?
We do not have data beyond October yet. I'm pulling that up too, just so that everybody can see what Judy is referring to. There we are. Yes, so you're exactly right. It has been up and down. I do want to mention too with October, Judy specifically asked about October as well, how that you see a decline, and she was curious if it continued to decline in November. We don't have the numbers for November yet, but the Department of Revenue will release that by the end of this week. They usually release it around the 10th of the month, give or take. So I'll be able to provide that information then. But I do want to mention October does include a significant refund from Moore County, which does impact the total Moore County, the pool that Moore County has to distribute to municipalities. So this is another one of those examples, similar to one we saw maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that, where the total state growth was over 5%, but we're showing a decline of almost 2%. And it's because the refunds were pulled out of our portion.
And there's no systematic approach to the way those refunds are done. In other words, not done during the same month every year to the same.
Exactly. Random.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's based on when someone, like for example, us, we request a sales tax refund from Moore County as well each year. But you have, I believe we have like a 6-month period that we can submit our application for that. So it depends on when the county processes that application. That's when the funds are withdrawn from the pool.
Yeah. All right.
Do you
Well,
think-
interesting to see what November brings. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I'll be happy to share that with you as soon as they publish that for us.
Just to tag on, could that explain August a little bit? Why its number it's still an increase, but I mean, there might, in other words, why wouldn't the county communicate significant refund? Just so we could figure this out long term.
Sure, that it's published. So in the information that the Department of Revenue publishes for us, they have that information available. So what I do, I pull up year over year and compare the refunds from, for example, October of 2021 and then October of 2020. I compare, when I say 2020, the fiscal year, I compare those two numbers to see if refunds are significantly different, and to see if that's an impact. But all that information is provided on the Department of Revenue's website.
It might be helpful to point out too, Kevin, it's not just the county, it's all of us municipalities as well.
Yes.
We're part of that unpredictable problem in the same way that they are. And to your point, yeah, it might help to explain why, for example, in August, we only saw 4.9% growth over last year. Conversely, it might also explain why we saw a 20% growth in September. In other words, you might have had the big deduction last year in September and not this year.
Right.
It almost feels to me, to realistically see what the ebb and flow is to add all the refunds in on not, it's not a real column, but at least it shows you the trending of sales tax. I mean, seeing a column with all the refunds added back in would really give you a trend line of sales tax collection. So not that Brooke needs more work, but I mean, it almost feels like that would show you a realistic curve on how things are moving. Just add them in, even though it's not an accounting issue, it's more of an information thing. Anyway.
Right. And that is one reason, Kevin, why I do try to provide, when I provide the update to the managers and early on into the pandemic, I try to provide the statewide average too, when comparing our number with the statewide number, just because there's a little bit less fluctuation at the state level. And that gives us a little better comparison to say, okay, why are we running so low? Is it because the economy itself is not doing as well, or is it because of something that's specific to Pinehurst or Moore County?
But I would say the state level doesn't help us understand when we're having a hotter trend, than the rest of the state, or a weaker trend. So, I think we have a unique situation here. So I don't know. I feel like adding all the refunds back in, we'll see the trend line, but that's just my thoughts.
Thank you.
I have a question, sort of rhetorical question about the price point of the new homes. Shrinking from $292 to about $250,000. That does concern me a little bit, given all the anecdotal stuff about how hot our market is.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna throw this supposition out there, maybe Darren can chime in. I'm guessing that, we're getting that number based off the reported property value that comes in with the permit application. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In other words, it's,
Not real.
that number isn't worth reporting.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
good. I like that answer.
Judy, I had the same question because with all the building that's going on and the skyrocketing cost of materials,
Mhm.
that stood out.
Yeah, we're not gonna know until we actually see the additions to the tax rolls.
Yeah.
Good. That's fine.
But that one's real then.
But I agree with your number. 150 was my number too, about how many new homes we might have this year.
Great.
I had one other question. Down there talking about soccer and lacrosse practices are occurring at the track. Is that overflow from someplace else, or where did we get this additional soccer and lacrosse practice? You might know. It's in your report.
Yes, absolutely. And Mark mentioned that we had some additional lacrosse, and I could see those revenues coming in. He did not specifically mention where they are coming from. I remember these began, excuse me, about a year or so ago with them trickling in, and then it seemed to take hold. I'm not sure if this is a more appealing location for them possibly to have this space, but I can certainly ask Mark to get his input.
Well,
my assumption on some of that was due to the elementary school taking away one of the fields that was used. Some of this moved over to the infield of the track, which is a perfectly good place from my point of view.
But some of them also play off the, like the, of number one. On the other side of the.
Yeah, on the mile track.
But a mile track, yeah.
On the mile track, thank you.
Yeah, no, my concern is if this is overflow, does it signify a need for additional recreational space? But wait, I can ask Mark.
Yeah,
Thank
Lydia,
you,
if I can jump in. I think we've had soccer and lacrosse practice on fields at the harness track or in the infields a couple of years ago. So I want to say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, they were practicing over there on a regular basis. Then they were able to find other fields. I do think it is partially indicative of a lack of field space in the county overall.
Okay, thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
And further on this, I think it's true, Brooke or Natalie, that those groups that are at the track are club teams as opposed to Pinehurst sponsored recreation teams. I think that's correct.
That is correct, John. Yeah, that's correct.
Mhm.
You know, also another thing at the very bottom, you were talking about diligent budget oversight, and I bet I would expect that's all encompassing at how hard you guys work to continue to keep an eye on our financial picture during these very difficult times.
Thank you, Lydia. We do monitor it very closely. We review expenditure statements on a monthly basis at a minimum, but department heads also have that information available to them at their fingertips, and they're able to provide or pull real-time expenditure information and review their budgets daily. It's updated every night. So that's very useful, and very grateful that department heads do an excellent job at monitoring that.
Yeah, that should make the public happy.
Jeff, Sam, what I'm going to suggest, this is a very good base and a very strong financial picture for the new budget to be set. So some unknowns, but I think we're in good position.
Yeah, I think we're certainly better off than we maybe feared that we were going to be at this point 9 months ago. So in general, it's a good story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do we need, I'm not sure I should ask this question or not, but I will. Do we need to reset any other priorities or add in some things? I think, our understanding is we'll keep to the budget as initially prepared. And we see a lot clearer now what's been happening, and things are pretty strong. So you'll just carry on to finish the fiscal year 21 budget, and we don't need to make any changes to that.
Right, and we've got a better set of assumptions to build upon for the FY 22 and beyond budget.
Okay.
Yes. And I will
Any
also
other questions on the financial report? I'm sorry, Lydia, or?
No, thank you.
Okay,
John, I would mention that we will be bringing forth a mid-year budget amendment to you at a later date as well. Planned for the next council meeting if possible. So you will see some adjustments or some proposed adjustments to some revenue and expenditure accounts based on the information that you've just heard.
okay. And that would come to us in March?
Plan to be the second meeting in February if
Oh, okay.
possible.
Next meeting
That's
up.
the goal. Yes, sir.
Okay. Moving along to item number 9, discuss and consider resolution amending the village's fund balance policy. Brooke, I imagine you're going to participate in that. Jeff, do you want to introduce the subject?
I sure can, John. I mean, this is another good discussion that we've been having with council over the last month or so, and very good dialogue. I think we're at the point now where you can consider approving this amendment or this new policy for amendment to the fund balance policy. So I'll turn it over to Brooke.
Perfect. As Jeff mentioned, this agenda item, it is a follow-up from your work session discussion on January 26th about some proposed revisions to the fund balance policy. This did include the addition of a provision to commit excess fund balance for future capital needs. And just to summarize the couple of changes that are being proposed, in section 1, we're proposing to modify the language from in the range of 30 to 40% to a minimum of 30%. And also in section 3, we're proposing to add this entire provision to commit a percentage of fund balance for future capital needs if fund balance at year end exceeds 40% of actual general fund expenditures. So after hearing your feedback at the work session about whether this proposed language was along the line of meeting your needs, I did reach out to the UNC School of Government about the necessary steps to meet the logistical requirements. Those are required by GASB. We have to meet certain requirements in order to properly report fund balance and make sure that the proper steps are taken to commit fund balance in a way that we meet those requirements. So they did recommend that we approve a separate resolution each year. That way there's a clear trail of council's intent to commit those funds each year for the future capital purposes. And also this representative mentioned to me that policies themselves are not legally binding. So he did not feel like that alone, approving this resolution alone would suffice. And so that was his recommendation. If council approves the recommended amendment to the fund balance policy, we would bring forth a resolution to you to commit the fund balance each year in June. We bring that along with the subsequent year's budget ordinance just for a timing purpose to keep it consistent. So you would see the budget for the next year and then this resolution for the year that you're wrapping up. This would allow council just to take deliberate action about the amount that you would like to commit for future capital each year. However, the calculation of this number would occur after fiscal year end once all expenditures are finalized and closed out for the year. And all this information would be reported to you in the comprehensive annual financial report, the CAFR presentation, but also in the quarterly financial statements, which you see a little bit earlier than the audit presentation of the CAFR in December. So earlier today, Judy did recommend a minor language change to section 3, which we have incorporated into this slide here, or this area here. Her recommendation was to add this section by approving a separate resolution. So this will now read, council may commit excess fund balance each year for future capital needs by approving a separate resolution for the respective year. That way it calls it out. It's very clear that a separate resolution has to take place and be approved before the funds are technically committed. So that was a good revision, and we have included that here. If you desire, tonight you may make a motion to approve the resolution 2103 as revised, which includes that language if you're interested in that adjustment. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions?
Well, I just feel like this change reconciles everything from the last discussion, because that
Yes.
was really the major discussion point. So now I feel like we all should be on the same page with this school government change. So, and then with Judy's change. So I'm prepared to make a motion, but I don't want to rush it, but you get to discuss it after, there's discussion before approval, but is that okay for me to make a motion?
May I just,
Let's just do some questions and then we'll get to that, Kevin. Thank you, though. Good idea. Lydia, go ahead.
yeah, not really a question, but it seems to me that this gives the public a place on the balance sheet where they can see actual funds being set aside for capital needs. And that seems to be the primary benefit of this, or a major benefit, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just needed that clarification. Thanks.
Yes.
That's a good way to say it, Lydia. Yeah.
Yes, I've heard people say that they don't like it put away in a capital account where it can't be seen. So I think that's consistent with what I heard, Lydia. They like seeing it there.
Judy or Jane, any questions?
No.
Okay. Kevin, would you like to make a motion?
I would. And this is, before I make the motion, I want to thank all the previous councils and that have got us in this position, because I think that you don't go from not being able to afford a fire truck to this position without good previous council management. So I want to thank them. I move to approve resolution 21-03, amending the Village of Pinehurst fund balance policy.
And do we need to insert there
As revised.
as revised? I move to approve resolution 2103 as revised.
No, it was revised prior.
Well, I think Brooke was recommending that, but let's
Let's talk to
may not be.
Beth. Is it not? It was revised. The one I saw was revised.
They're actually both in Novus,
Okay.
but this is the recommended resolution. Either way would be fine. Revised will not hurt.
Let me just change it then. I move to approve resolution 21-03, amending the Village of Pinehurst fund balance policy as revised.
Second.
Motion by Kevin Drum, the second by Lydia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Good
Kevin,
job,
Thank you very
staff.
much.
Good job, staff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Thanks, Natalie.
Job.
All right, we'll move on to item number 10. Is there any other business that council wants to bring, or council or staff wishes to bring to our attention in the regular meeting? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll take comments now from attendees. Beth, do you want to manage that from Assembly Hall as far as guests that are present?
Yes, Colette Kalinsky would like to speak now.
Colette?
Yes.
And please speak into the microphone, Colette, and identify yourself. Thank you.
Colette Kalinsky, Queens Court. It's just in regards to last week, February 4th, 2021 P&Z meeting, focusing on tree protection ordinance development. Before the meeting, I gave Darren a copy of the development tree protection ordinances in North Carolina dated 2017. I had given copies of this to several former council members, but Darren seemed to be surprised to see it. Then we fast forward to a bill introduced in 2019 by McInnes and entered as Bill 367, stripping local control over tree governance. That last information on that bill status was in April 2019. Yet 2 months later, in June 2019, the document titled Protection and Retaining Trees in North Carolina was published. I made a copy of that last week, dated February 5th, 2021, as printed on the last page of the document, so I believe it's pretty current. I would just like to make sure, so there's no surprises when this does come up before the council, that I give John a copy of both of these in case he has not read either of them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other comments from residents in Village Hall? Seeing
No.
none, does the clerk have comments that have come into public through our email system? Public comments.
Yes, I actually have one.
All right, would you speak into the microphone, please, Beth? Thank you.
Yes, this comment is from Timothy Kemp, and this was sent to the public comment email address as well as copied the county commissioners. As a citizen of the Village of Pinehurst and Moore County, I wish to express my deep concern and strong disagreement over the government's harmful and unreasonable violation of my God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness by the state and federal government. The following is a list of grievances that the above elected officials have levied against we the people. Number 1, forced to wear a mask without choice, a gross violation of our God-given rights. Number 2, slander and libel by labeling any individual that does not support the generically government as domestic terrorists, Nazis, and extremist organizations, causing people to be fired from jobs, ridiculed by leftist supporters, and threatened with violence, a gross violation of our God-given rights. Number 3, violations of privacy by listening and recording private conversations through the use of technology such as computers, cell phones, and smart devices, a gross violation of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. Number 4, censoring speech, a gross violation of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. Number 5, passing and attempting to pass laws to prevent ownership of arms, a gross violation of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. Number 6, writing executive orders to bypass the legislative process in the spirit of the law, gross violation of every article in the United States and North Carolina Constitutions. First, I would like to recommend the Village of Pinehurst and the Moore County put a law into place that allows for a vote by county elected officials to determine whether or not federal and/or executive order violates the constitutional rights of the people of Moore County. If so, Moore County reserves the right to declare itself a sanctuary county, free of the executive order that violates constitutional rights. Second, I would like to recommend the formation of well-regulated volunteer reserve deputy force that can be trained and supervised under the direction and control of the Moore County Sheriff that can be deputized in order to protect and defend the county's sanctuary status if needed. That's all.
Thank you. And there are no other public comments this evening, then, Beth?
No, sir.
All right. That would bring us to the end of the regular meeting. We have a motion to adjourn, and that motion should include the notation that the meeting is continued until tomorrow, February 10th at 6 p.m. Is there a motion to read, please?
I move to adjourn the regular meeting and continue, I move to recess the regular meeting and continue it tomorrow, the 10th of February at 6 p.m.
Motion by Judy Davis. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jane Hogaman. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and the regular meeting is in recess until February 10th at 6 p.m. That brings us to our work session. It is 6:07 by my watch. Shall we take a break till 6:15 and then come back to the work session?
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Kevin? I think everybody's muted, except the three of us, Jeff and Lydia.
I'm back.
No, but I'm here. You don't see me?
No, but I hear you. That's it. Yeah. So
Okay, well, that's
Yeah.
enough.
That's good.
I see Kevin and Judy.
Okay. All right. So Kevin, Judy, Jane, and myself are here, and Lydia. Jason, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have myself on mute.
You and everybody. All right, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the February 9th, 2021 work session of the Pinehurst Village Council. It's 6:15 p.m. We have a few items on our agenda tonight, starting with a discussion of the Moore County occupancy tax question and a couple other comments and a couple additions here. First of all, I want to thank Jeff for supplying earlier today a list of future topics for the work sessions. I think that were those all work session oriented? Some of those would be regular meetings, Jeff.
I think most of it would probably be regular meeting, John. I didn't go to the trouble of trying to delineate that. We'll figure that out going forward.
All right. So that'll be very helpful through the next couple of months. Also, I'd like to add here some discussion tonight of our proposed February 18th meeting with the Planning and Zoning Board. And then in discussions with Kevin earlier today after the Partners in Progress meeting, an idea came to his mind and mine about following up on an idea from the Baldridge input last week. So we'll get to those two other things as we go along. But principally here we have the Moore County occupancy tax question, and Jeff's been able to put together some information for us. A lot of education needed on all of our parts for this. So Jeff, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, John. I think everybody remembers that or recalls that about a month ago, a little over a month ago, we were notified by Moore County that the Board of Commissioners were going to consider a proposal from the CVB on what to do with the additional 3% occupancy tax that was authorized several years ago, but Moore County has never taken the opportunity to actually increase that collection. And this discussion has been actually going on for quite some time. I think that the CVB's proposal or recommendation has been under development for well over a year. It had been talked about a little bit in the Tri-Cities framework, and Paul and Reagan and I started doing some collective analysis on it well over a year as well. But what happened was the CVB contacted the county and said, like, we'd like to make this proposal, and the county commissioners, I think, rightfully recognized that they had heard from various municipalities in Moore County, whether from boards or from through staff channels and managers or what have you, that there might be some other ideas about how to best use that 3% additional increase. And so I thought it would be good to take the deliberate step of inviting representation from, in particular, Southern Pines, Aberdeen, and Pinehurst to come to that meeting so that we would have a voice at the table. Ultimately, the county commissioners took that topic off the table that had been scheduled for their second meeting in January, and it sounds like perhaps it's going to come back up now on March 10th, which gives us a little bit more time to contemplate this question. We did learn at the last Tri-Cities meeting that Southern Pines and Aberdeen's boards have already considered this question, and they seem resolved to ask the county commissioners some sort of a specific occupancy tax revenue sharing scheme, which would send some portion of that additional 3% directly to municipalities, and a lot of detail would have to be worked out around that. But this is the first time that we've had the opportunity to bring this question to you as a board for you to consider what is most appropriate. And so What I'm going to cover here is kind of the background of what the occupancy tax system looks like, how it's used in Moore County, and what's on the table in terms of recommendations from the CVB, and what the thinking of myself, Paul, and Reagan has been as we've been talking about this topic over the last year as well. So the enabling legislation it's come in two pieces actually. The first one was in that might be a typo. I think it was actually 2011, not 2001. But the initial occupancy tax authorization came in a local bill for Moore County, and it authorized a total of 3% withholding of room night revenue, and it in terms of how it could be used, that bill specified that at least 2/3 of that 3% or 2% must be used to promote travel and tourism, and the remainder, or up to 1/3 or 1%, could be used for other tourism-related expenses. And that's kind of the way Moore County's CVB has been operating since its inception. And I've got some data points here off on the right-hand side of the slide. You can see in 2018, 3% represented just a little bit north of $1.8 million. And that was kind of the high water mark. I think time last year, they were looking at, they thought they might finish last year above $2 million actually, based on where they were at that point. I think they actually fell off a little bit in the end. You can see that in 2020, that 3% was reported to be down to $1.4 million, and that's what we expect that is representative of the COVID impact. So you're looking at about, I don't know, a little over 20% negative impact over the last year on the hotel business and hotel and occupancy, short-term rental, the whole gambit in Moore County as a result of COVID. I don't know to what degree that might be rebounding now. I don't know that anybody would expect that degree of a downturn would be expected to continue. There should be some rebound at some point to some degree. I don't, that's information we don't have. In 2015, the General Assembly acted again based on a Moore County request to increase its authorized occupancy tax withholding, and that increase was for an additional 3%. And as I said before, although it was authorized in 2015, it has never been used to this date. And again, like was the case for the initial 3%, at least 2/3 of that 3% or 2% can be used for promotion of travel and tourism, and up to 1/3 of it can be used for tourism-related expenses. Now, what I learned from CVB representative recently is that historically, what the CVB has been doing in practice is using all of its occupancy tax revenue for the promotion of travel and tourism, and they've not been using any or substantially any money for this other category called tourism-related expenditures. So, for example, in 2018, when it was $1.8 million, that was $1.8 million that was being used to promote travel and tourism. Of course, that also paid the bills for the operation of the CVB and staff pay and benefits and all that stuff as well, but that's all part of that category. I provided a couple of definitions there for you that are in both of those local bills about what promotion of travel and tourism means and what tourism-related expenditures means. And the reality is that if you look at how these terms, these terms are generally used across the state. How they're interpreted across the state, there's no common ground. And in fact, there's never been any real clarifying effort, at least from a legal standpoint, to define, what are the categories of things that fall into these buckets, if you will. But what we have to work with is the language that's in our local bill. And at the end of the day, I think Moore County CVB is okay, as long as they can make the reasonable case that what they're authorizing that money to be spent on is in line with these requirements. So what we think we know currently about the CVB's proposal, and I think I say this is what we think, is on this slide. The reality is, although it was on the County Board of Commissioners agenda for their second week in January, Moore County never actually received a copy of that proposal. I had a conversation with some representatives of the CVB earlier or later last week, and what I learned from that conversation was their thinking is very much still in line with what we heard from Phil Wirtz about this time last year. And so that's what you see on this slide is pretty much a representation of what he told us at that time, and some of it I was able to point by point confirm in that conversation late last week. What they would like to do is add 1 more % of the additional 3% promotion of travel and tourism. So he had 3% before, add 1 more % on top of that, and it would be 4%. And so if you look at that in terms of pre-COVID dollars or dollars or what I showed you for 2018, that would be about $2.5 million annually. And then they would propose to use the other 2% for tourism product development. And this would be an effort to get, to specifically target in big and meaningful ways, in other words, big projects potentially, this notion of tourism-related expenses. And in pre-COVID dollars or 2018 dollars that we saw before, that would be about $1.2 million annually. We believe that they have modeled this approach after an approach that was taken in Asheville and in some other areas of the state and the country. And they've got some good information about, what those other communities have been able to accomplish as a result of using this approach. I think, based on what in my conversations, I think most fundamentally they have keyed in on what Asheville has done. Might be helpful to point out, though, that in Asheville's case, it's a 4.5%, 1.5% split. 4.5% is used, to my understanding anyway, is used for promotion of travel and tourism, and they have 1.5% set aside for this product development type of fund activity. What I learned last week was the CVB would intend to put some restrictions on what might be appropriate for grants originating from this product development fund. It was interesting to learn that they are suggesting that it should be only used for public-private partnerships or not-for-profit organizations. I think that's helpful. They said the individual grant projects would be approved by the CVB using a 2-stage approval process. And what that looks like is each one of them would be vetted by a relatively small product development committee. I think there are 5 members on that committee. And then only if those 5 members that are on the product development committee deem a project to be worthy, would a project go forward to the full CVB board for approval. And I think it's important to ponder that. I think there's good logic and good sense in trying to set the system up like that. But I think it's also possible that you wind up with 5 people having veto power over, what the rest of the CVB gets to consider. And you might want to be mindful of who those 5 people are. Some examples that we learned from CVB reps about what they might deem to be appropriate projects. An amphitheater or large performance venue. I mean, we've heard about in the past about desires in our community from our residents of having some type of facility like that in the village. And, so I think that, the possibility that these types of funds could be used to help defer the expense of building such a facility. I think that has some appeal and power. Interesting to note that they suggested maybe a fair barn type facility. And that has some other connotations, I think. The possibility that perhaps Aberdeen or Southern Pines or Carthage might build a competitor to our fair barn. Discussion about the appropriateness of the Hillcrest Park project, Moore County's recreation facilities there, and whether or not that should be appropriate. I don't know. Perhaps if it was doing the right things for the right people, it would be appropriate, and it would be for the use of tourism dollars. But I'm not sure I see that one. What was described as an upscale sporting preserve, a zip line complex. Another one that kind of caught my interest was this discussion, actual specific mentioned last week about funding for a Tufts Archives/museum project. And we can think back about the history of that conversation, and I'm not sure what conclusions anybody might draw from that. But I guess potentially it might be available if we want to do something special to enhance the Tufts Archives experience to be more museum-like. If we do wind up taking over the Tufts Archives from the library and archives board in the future, maybe funding like this could be an appropriate use to help defray those expenses. Again, this is coming from them. So, and I mentioned that Reagan Parsons and Paul Savison and I have been talking about this topic for quite some time. And I think that among the 3 of us, where we were kind of agreeing was that a little bit different from what the CVB has been developing. We would suggest that take 1% of that additional 3%, 4%, and use that for promotion of travel and tourism. So this is exactly the same as what the CVB is recommending, 4% for promotion of travel and tourism. Then take the additional 2% and split it. 1% for a tourism product development fund, as described by the CVB, to be used and implemented and managed the way that they're describing, and then take the other percent and distribute to municipalities to be used for legitimate tourism-related expenses. And so you're talking about, in pre-COVID dollars, you're talking about $600,000 per year in each one of those pots. So potentially $600,000-ish that could be spread across Moore County's municipalities for a wide range of tourism-related expenses. There's not a lot of agreement right now between myself and Paul and Reagan about how that might be done. There are some notions that have been put on the table. I think there's some common ground that if this type of an approach was taken, that it would be appropriate to off the top say every municipality gets a certain baseline number. It's just to make sure that small communities like Robbins and Bass and Cameron that that don't really have any lodging facilities might still be able to take advantage of occupancy tax dollars in an effort to promote day trippers and stuff like that coming to their maybe an event or something. Help in that effort, and then take the rest of that 1% and distribute it in some sort of proportionate manner. You know, if you were there for the Tri-Cities meeting a couple of weeks ago, you heard Paul Savaston lay out a suggestion that it should be done by beds, number of beds in each community. I'm not sure how we would count numbers of beds. I guess it's technically possible, but it's not information that we have at our fingertips. Approach that, and a different approach that I thought we had agreement on several months ago, but and I'm not really sure where Reagan stands on this one anymore. But a different approach would be to distribute proportionally based on the amount of occupancy tax that's collected in each municipality. And you know, if you look at Aberdeen's position and Pinehurst's position, it's probably easy to see why Paul comes down on one side and I come down on the other. In these two different proportionate sharing methodologies. You know, by my rough math, it looks like about 40% of all of Moore County's occupancy tax is collected within the boundaries of Pinehurst. I don't think we also have 40% of the beds. So yeah, I think that describes that. An alternate approach might just say, just do it based on population. I don't know that necessarily any one of us three feel strongly about that type of a methodology. But the general notion here is that among the three city managers, we think that proportionate sharing methodology would be a big piece of such an approach. I think it's important to note that the language in the local bill requires that tourism related expense dollars have to be spent on things that are deemed appropriate by the Moore County Tourism Development Authority, or the CVB. And therefore, in order for a process like what three of us are potentially recommending here to work, I think we would almost have to have a categorical list that's approved and negotiated with and approved by the CVB ahead of time that says these are the types of expenditures that it would be appropriate for the municipalities in Moore County to spend these dollars on. I guess ultimately, if there was something that we felt strongly, we could, on a case-by-case basis, go back to the CVB and ask for specific authorization to spend money on X, Y, or Z, if we could make the case to them. But the bottom line is, we would have to get their concurrence or their buy-in on some level in order to do this, and unless we want to go back and ask for a change to the local bill framework that authorizes occupancy tax collection in Moore County. In the conversation that I had with a couple of representatives from the CVB last week, it was clear that there was some common ground. Both of them agreed and accepted that local governments do some things that are probably appropriate uses for those dollars. And they're not all just capital projects that, you know, like building a, I don't know, like I said, use the new second fair barn example. More specifically, we talked about things like gateway enhancements and the continued enhancement of landscaping that we've continued to push down the 211 corridor, and you know, improvements that we continue to make to places like the traffic circle, and our desire and future efforts to, for example, re-put the shine on our downtown in other areas, particularly given the fact that we've got a bunch of US Opens coming here and we've got all that impact, and we want to have the right impact, positive impact on those visitors when they come so that they'll come back again. And there was general agreement between all three of us that those types of expenditures are legitimate use for occupancy tax dollars. And what I heard from the CVB representatives was as long as it's incremental, as long as it's adding to, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, in other words, don't use it to pay the bills that you're currently doing. Use it to do something more that enhances the experience for visitors so that we are actually making an investment. And I think that's the common ground. I think, I don't know the degree to which they might ultimately have a stomach for some sort of a deliberate cost or a revenue sharing methodology, as Paul and Reagan and I have suggested. We do have a potential meeting in the works between Paul, Reagan, myself, Tom Pasley, Kelly Miller, and Phil Wirtz. We are trying to align our schedules to make that happen in the next week or so. It looks like, based on the feedback I'm getting right now, or have so far, it could happen as early as next Monday, but we're still waiting on input from two of those folks. I think certainly by the end of next week, we should be able to make that happen. And the desire is to try to build on this common ground about what might be the best approach for Moore County. So that's what I've got to say, and I'm interested to hear what you all have to think.
Well, Jeff, thanks very much. This idea has certainly moved around in some different directions over the past several months from where the managers left off a while ago, as you've said, and even in our own minds, as certainly my own, as I understand more about the dynamics of all this and how funds can be used. But clearly, I think we all have a bunch of questions on this. And I don't know, Judy, would you care to start off with any questions tonight on this concept?
Well, I just want to go over the numbers.
Yeah.
So there's 3% that is on occupancy tax now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes back to the CVB. And then there's another 3, making it a total of 6 that was approved but has never been levied.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
And then they're asking for yet another % on top of that for a total of 7?
No.
Okay.
Total of 6.
Total of 6, okay. So I know one of the questions people had was sensitivity to occupancy tax. And is it a deterrent to tourism? And it's absolutely not, in my opinion. You have too many corporate visitors, you have too many people coming here, and the occupancy tax is ignored by the hotel guests, in my opinion. So I don't feel that there's much sensitivity around that number at all. But the CEB wants somehow for us to come up with a project and submit a grant proposal to some, obviously maybe not that big, but some kind of proposal for how we'd use the money. And then they might grant that or not.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
On an annual basis.
It's not really clear. I mean, it almost sounds like it could be on an as desired basis. But I don't know how they would determine what's the best use for that money that year unless they consider them all at the same time,
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that if they're putting up a pool of money, 600,000 or whatever, then that's something that we don't have to lose out on it altogether if we don't have a proposal in at a certain time. Or if I propose more than somebody else, do I get more money? Sort of thing. Just what could be done there. So I think there's some unevenness in that sort of thing, and I think that the idea of incremental investment is a good one that the CDB should encourage. Make more things in your community that people will want to come see. I definitely can see that as a carrot that they could hold out. But I also still think that we do a lot of work for those guests that are here, and we're not necessarily compensated for that. So
right.
I can argue multiple sides of this.
Good. Anybody else?
I'm
Yes,
sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
yes, please, don't get me, no, I had the opportunity last June, the CVB let me speak to them about Landmark, and it happened to be a meeting when they were talking about this. And we were just getting into the horrors of COVID. And one really important part of their presentation, which is lacking in this, and I'm not sure if it would seem to me still to be relevant, is they were comparing, they gave information on how our surrounding states, how legislatures were funding travel and tourism in those states. And North Carolina was giving little to nothing. The General Assembly was giving them little to nothing. So they felt like that put them at a competitive disadvantage. And speaking of competitive disadvantage, and Kevin may have something to say about this, but the golf industry is highly competitive. And we may think that we're the cream of the crop and everybody wants to come to Pinehurst. And even if that's the case, they still always have to keep their foot on the gas. So when all these surrounding states were funding tourism so heavily because of COVID and trying to bring people into their states, and here our CVB was left with, with not much. And that may be what prompted them to kick into gear again, the request for this additional 3%. And I've talked to Tom Beddoes about it several times because he's the chair of that board. And I think there are a lot of mechanics still to be worked out. I think, Jeff, you would agree with that. But I hope that CVB, I hope y'all get to have this meeting next week and can get all of the concerns on the table. But if these important facts that are part of the backstory are still there, I think it's relevant to why our CVB needs this increase. And again, I've got the bill right here. It was, 2015, there it was. They were allowed to, to implement this additional 3%. And I don't know if you guys remember, but for a while there, they were going to use this extra money for an athletic facility in Aberdeen, and that didn't go over well. So now then nothing happened. And so now I think they're at a point, from what I'm hearing, is they feel like they need it. But I think they're trying to be really good stewards with this additional 3%. So I would like to hear more from them, or have somebody hear more from them about, number one, the need, and then let's hash out how it's going to be spent. Work out those mechanics.
Mm-hmm. I think sort of at the central core here, though, is if there's to be an increase, and then you can argue how it should be divided up, but who in the end has control of the funds? Who can do with what they want? Is it going to be
the CVB
municipalities directly? Is it going to be CVB through the grant of idea?
That is the question.
That's a major differentiating point here among different ideas, I think. Yeah.
I don't think there's a question there. I think it's a CVB.
Yeah.
And according to your document, it's a small group, and then it goes to the larger board.
You're talking about the grants, the grant request.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So I'm thinking the CVB is total, absolute control.
Well, it does. I think the state.
I just want to be clear on what you're saying. Clearly, that is what their proposal is. Are you saying that you're not open to a sharing of revenue with municipalities?
No, it's not. I was just trying to answer John's question. I'm sorry. I'm not. Don't read too much. All I was saying is John was asking whose decision would it be, and
that is the question that's on the table here.
Yeah, I thought the decision would be the CVB.
But Jeff, what's the CVB?
On what's funded. On what's funded.
No, Jeff is asking about this 1%. And I would like to know what the CVB's position is on that 1%.
They have a 2% position.
No. Jeff is talking about, you get the 3%, one of it goes into travel and tourism.
That's where.
No, that's a Jeff and the city manager's idea.
Correct. And that's, I'd like to know
what their proposal is and what.
We know what the CVB's proposal is. They want 2% to go to
well, maybe everyone.
Product development fund that they control.
Right.
Yes.
We know that.
John's question on who controls the funds, and to me, it's pretty clear in the enabling legislation. It's the CVB.
Yes, the Tourism Authority.
But that was all I was doing, Jeff.
Yeah.
They
have to approve. They have to approve on some level. In some way, they have to approve.
Yeah.
Less types of
Right.
project work.
I wasn't making my comments yet. I was just trying to make
Yeah.
that clear. I don't think there's anything but it goes through the CVB. You know.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct.
Well, I guess my question really was, are the municipalities individually going to have any of these funds under
I think-
scenarios that can, or not? And not all these options are on the table. Well, they basically are, but they're not. They're different versions of it, I suppose. But we need to decide, in our case, does Pinehurst want to control some of these funds? And if so, we develop a policy or agree to a policy that awards us that, or is it in the hands of others? That's kind of a basic point.
Wait,
I think-
John, let me clarify. Your question says, does Pinehurst control any of these funds?
We don't right now.
Correct, and
The question is, should we? Should
yeah, and that's where I would like to hear what the CVB has to say.
we know what they want to control all of it.
Right.
But then tell us why that's a good idea and why it's not a good idea.
Mm.
I mean, would we go to the county and say, okay, we support your doing this if you will allow us to take some of this to do what we would like to do with it? Is that what you're proposing?
Is that what we're proposing?
The county managers.
Yeah.
No,
Well, yeah, you know,
I see managers.
our proposal would be to push for some sort of a direct revenue sharing methodology that would result in us in each county's board or each city's board or municipality's board having the ability to decide on individual expenditures that meet conditions that have been placed by the CVB.
And see, it's hard for me to say I agree with that unless I hear the CVB's response to that.
Yeah.
Their direct response to that.
Well,
Okay. All right. Now,
I don't-
now,
I appreciate that, Lydia, but I mean, the reality is that they're pushing hard to do this thing on the 10th of March. And I'm trying to work to some common ground here. And we
Yeah.
try to develop a method to reach some common ground before you wind up with confrontation in front of the county commissioners on March 10th.
Yeah.
Because we're not the only municipality involved in this discussion.
mhm, mhm.
I
Hey,
don't
Jeff,
mind.
Just
Yeah.
saying, Lydia, on that point, Jeff, it is the concept at the commissioner level that they need to hear and want to hear from each of the 10 municipalities, correct? And that this would affect and potentially each municipality would get, under one scenario, some share of this. That's one of the ideas that was on the board.
Yeah.
Not all the points, but everybody, all the county is involved in this.
Yeah, right. And what I heard from Wayne was that as a result of direct communications to some of the county commissioners, in some cases it was in a letter form, and in some cases it was, I think, contacting commissioners directly on the subject from various municipalities. There is some belief among several of the county commissioners that there should be some form of a direct revenue sharing framework put in place.
You know, Jeff, I don't know if it's possible, you know, if the facts they gave us back in June of last year are still the same in terms of the millions of dollars that tourism authorities around us were getting. If they're getting millions of dollars more than ours are getting, I think that's a strong argument that our CVB needs to get it all to promote travel and tourism.
Okay.
Because at the time in June,
Provide us examples of communities that are our size that we're outmatched on.
wait, are you
I don't
asking?
know. I mean, it's easy to throw around big market numbers out there and say that we're underfunded.
No, this was in their PowerPoint presentation, and it was how much, as I recall, the South Carolina was giving X million of dollars to tourism. Tennessee was giving this many dollars. So all of these tourism authorities in all these surrounding states were being given millions of dollars by their state legislature. where our General Assembly was giving little to nothing. So they felt like that put them at a competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And with golf being as competitive as it is in the Southeast, to me, that's why they were really kicking off this, trying to get the additional 3%. So if that different treatment still exists, that would be to me, that would be an argument in favor of them letting them use the money in complete compliance with this local bill. And that's just a fact I'm missing right now.
Both approaches are in complete compliance with the local bill.
Well, okay, but it's just hard for me to make a determination until I understand if that disadvantage still exists and how they might express how they're penalized because they don't have the funding that other legislatures are providing.
Yeah, I remember that presentation, Lydia, and you're correct. There were some statistics. I don't remember the magnitude of them, but it was pretty interesting, pretty compelling. If that's still the case, we don't know. That's your question about it too. But
it's probably on this laptop, but I don't dare go look for it because I might cut you off.
Is this that presentation?
Yeah.
It would have started with that.
Yeah, this is the one that we got.
Does it say June 2019?
No, I think I got this before that, but it probably is the same.
Yeah, this was their presentation, and I think it was June last year.
Might have even been a little bit later, but anyway,
Yeah.
I remember you were there. I was listening by phone because you were going to talk about the landmark. And this other stuff came up as part of that, and that's some background we need to have. But again, I think and I know Kevin and Jane and Judy probably have other things to say here, but I think one of our decisions here is, do we want to follow a path that will bring dollars directly to Pinehurst through this increased tax for our use and our decision? Or are we comfortable having that process in others' hands, either completely, having those extra percentages in somebody else's hand completely, or through a mechanism like this product development idea where we and other municipalities would ask for grants from that? So we either follow the track of we want to control some of it ourselves, or we are part of a sharing arrangement of some sort that others decide.
And John, could I just maybe offer some other comments here as well? At least from my standpoint, I don't know how Paul and Reagan feel about this. And actually, based on some of the comments I heard last week or the last Tri-Cities meeting, I kind of wondered. But the idea isn't to take their money and use it for things that aren't appropriate. The idea is sometimes we have really good notions about how to appropriately use the same money for the same purpose, which is the promotion of travel and tourism.
Mm-hmm.
So the proposal, or what we're suggesting, isn't to take money off the table from that mission and use it some other way.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Can't be done. It all has to go into travel or travel related anyway.
That's right.
And it's just a question of who's going to make all the decisions on how all that money gets spent. And so I think, again, that one of the basic tenets here, we have to decide and give Jeff some direction and come to a consensus ourselves is, do we want the ability to control some of those funds directly under whatever formulas are agreed? Or are we comfortable having it either all go to the CVB on the one hand, or all of it go to the CVB and some would go into the product development idea, and we have to apply for a grant and that process there. That seems to me to be one of the critical points here.
Could I say something, John?
Absolutely. I think I'm anxious for Jane and Kevin and Judy to go ahead. Go ahead,
Okay, thanks.
Jane.
Before we get to how we spend all this additional money, the additional 3%, my question is, and this kind of goes along with what Lydia was saying. Why do we need that 3%? And are we better off? You know, it's a source of funding for a particular purpose. But do we really need it now? Or are we better leaving it in the cookie jar so that we could reach in and use it in the future, and it would be there, you know, as an additional boost in the future if we really needed it for some reason. And what I'm not hearing, except from Lydia's recollection of what she heard a couple of years ago at a CVB meeting.
It was last year.
Okay. Was that other states are spending more than North Carolina is. Well, if the other states are spending $12 million or something, is that one of the numbers that I heard? I don't know. Is that for the whole state, or is that just for a single county? You know, are we comparing apples to apples or apples to pears? And is it working for them? Is it working for them? Are they taking away some of our tourist opportunities by throwing more dollars at it? I would be interested to have a little bit more on why we want to raise the tax. Is it just because we can? When we are having this conversation, we're not even sure how we want to spend it.
Jane,
So-
wait, who's wait?
Can I suggest, maybe just
Jeff, go ahead, Jeff.
think that ship has sailed. The CVB wants it, Aberdeen wants it, Southern Pines wants it. All indications are the Moore County Commissioners want it.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
it's a useful conversation to have maybe, but I don't think it's a conversation that's going to bear any fruit.
Well, to Jane's point though, if under the idea that, say, all the municipalities would get some pro rata share under that scenario, that municipality can decide when and how to spend those monies.
That's right.
At any point.
We can bank it, and so can the CVB. They
Yes.
can leave it in that product development fund and wait for something very impactful.
Yeah. And again, it's a tax on people who are coming to the area. It's an occupancy tax at the hotels and motels.
Not a tax on us.
It's not a tax on us or our citizens to the degree they're not staying in the hotels sometimes. But anyway, Jane, did you have other questions on that? And I know Kevin has.
I just have
ideas on this.
one more question, and that is, I heard, I think from somebody at the School of Government, that STRs, short-term rentals, when they pay an occupancy tax, it goes into a generalized fund, that this was some kind of an arrangement that, was it the governor, was the legislature, I'm not sure, made with the realtors or the platforms or somebody who
Those are the same. Those are the
put
same.
forward STRs, so that we've got a lot of rental properties here, but nobody's going to know how much money they put into that pot. Are we going to get anything out of that pot, or is that a lost cause?
County knows.
Yeah, well, let me tell you what I learned last year when I
Not
went
sure
to
how
the
that works.
last year when I went to the SDR class, and short-term rentals are supposed to levy the occupancy tax. And in fact, in some counties, in the water bill, they were putting a little flyer that said, "Remember, if you're a short-term rental, you're supposed to pay this tax." And I brought it back and gave it to Phil. But then somehow a report is given from the state treasurer to the municipalities, but it's an incomplete report, and the municipalities are happy to get whatever they can get.
Yeah.
But they seem to think that some of the short-term rentals are falling through the cracks because the state treasurer, not the state treasurer, no, because he's a good one. Somebody's letting it, Secretary of State was letting it fall through the cracks and not doing everything they could to make sure that it was levied on short-term rentals. But that's a report I got a year ago, so it might not be accurate.
Well, but that doesn't deal with the issue here. Whatever, it's all about the occupancy tax and how much the county will get and how it gets divided up. But Kevin, I know you have some very interesting thoughts on this, so I'm sure you'd like to make them.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm 100% for the increase in the occupancy tax. So, I mean, I think you gotta start with that do we agree that we need the additional funding for tourism? And I've been in the tourism business, and the average rate is nationally is possibly above 6%, which means it will not impact travelers' impact whatsoever. It's common, and it's needed now. I wasn't, when it came out, I wasn't sure, if we needed that, but I mean, we're in some trouble with COVID-19. So that's, let me just get that clear. I'm for the increase. I think we're at I want to go with Lydia says, and Jeff, I know you want real numbers. I'm going to give you real numbers. I don't have them right now. I wasn't prepared for that. I should have been. I should have had real numbers, but I know that we're dealing with, you said something about a community our size. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. It's our competitive set that I'm looking at. Our competitive set sometimes spends up to 10 times what we're spending. And I will be able to prove that, okay? We have a competitive set, whether you like it or not. It's not about a community our size. We have a competitive set, and we are competing. And I would just say that we're at a huge disadvantage in this state. But I tell you, it tells you how great this state is. We don't spend the tourism dollars of other states. And I don't want to confuse the two. And we don't have a big, state giving money back down to the local CBBs like other states. But not only is the state not spending competitive dollars, but still succeeding because we're scrappy. We do think we're a cool state. We're a cool place, so they're scrappy, and they dropped all their print advertising and gone to digital. They just try to compete. And I think their efficiency. We grade our staff on efficiency. I think the tourism staff's efficiency and how they're creatively going to market with not enough money is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that could help them is additional money, so we could be in those traditional places of our competitors. And frankly, you're only in traditional media to make your digital media work. But you got to do a clicks and mortar strategy. You have to do some real media, which we're not doing now, to get the digital working. It used to be you did the real media and you had this minimalist digital footprint. So I just think they need it desperately. And I want to know more about the Asheville model. And I know a bunch of hotel owners in Asheville. I'll ask them what they think of it. And, I could do that. I could give you real budgets of our competitive set. Phil has them. I mean, we got an expert already. I mean, I don't know if we have to be experts, but they need it. So I just think that the first thing we should discuss is I support this increase. Then the second question is, I look at your presentation. Some of this is what they said, and some of this is like the second last page is an idea, right, Jeff? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's an idea.
First 3 pages are what you heard from them. So I just want to make sure we kind of separate what we heard from them and then the idea. Then the last page is what we heard from them too. So the last page is consistent. So really the second to last page, if we pulled that out, That's kind of your idea, and this is factual, the rest, right? This is kind of a factual reading of what you heard from the,
Kevin, it's all factual.
yeah. No, I meant, I didn't mean that. I meant that is what they're thinking. They're thinking 2% towards the development fund.
Yeah, I mean, if you go, the first page is.
I know it's all
framework, right?
Yeah.
The second page is what they are,
Right.
the proposal they are developing. The third page is a counter notion that has been kicked around by managers. And the fourth page is some thoughts on some common ground that's available. Not factual versus non-factual or ideas versus
I'm
facts.
just trying to separate between, what they proposed.
Yeah.
And I thought, I wanted to ask you a question. They said that in the past, they were going to fund, it wasn't limited to nonprofits. Is that a fact that they said that they would only fund public-private partnerships or
They
not?
did share that with me last week, yes.
So that is a fact now?
That's
Because
what I got from them verbally, yes.
because that wasn't in like last year.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you that again.
And they mentioned that when they said it. They said something along the lines of, when they were initially thinking about this, they thought maybe it'd be appropriate for some of these funds to be used for private projects, but they've changed their thinking on that.
Well, I guess if that's their limitation, then the entire 2% is open for guess who we are? We're public. We're public. So it kind of already dealt. That's a big change. That was something that made I got a little scared of when government picks winners and losers. But I think that's a big change.
I agree with that.
Right. So that's dramatic, and that's a change since I've been involved with this last year. But being a tourism professional, what I do for a living, there's no way I'd allot money out, to municipalities without parameters. For example, I'm not saying any big parameters. I'm saying you can't have a cowboy mentality. The branding has to be the same. They would probably have branding guidelines, on anything you did, like a formatted type of advertising. So everything would drive the home of golf, Yeah. So just to think for a second that we'd have control, I think it's just not realistic. I'm okay. I think that we got such talented people. We got such good people and staff that we could compete for that money in projects. And if Southern Pines and Aberdeen has a project that the Tourism Bureau thinks will help tourism better, that helps us too. So, I mean, I'm not scared of competing for funds, and I'm a little worried about just the dole out. Does that make any sense? I think we'd do fine in a competitive environment for these funds. I mean, I just think we would, and because of the new parameters, public-private partnerships or nonprofits. I just think we do well in that parameter. And then my other concern is with the raising of the 3%, the Tourism Bureau is only getting an additional 600,000. That scares me. But
That's their plan.
I know, but that I guess I'm not comfortable with their plan, but they're smarter than we are in the tourism space, maybe. And so I think that's a question. I mean, I feel like they need more. That's kind of where my brain's at. I feel like they need more than that. But so I'm curious why they're recommending only 1% to the collective advertising when I know we're in such a disadvantage in our competitive set. So my worry is we almost come out better, all this money being spent on tourism, collectively in some respect. But I appreciate what I want to go back to the Baldridge thing. Innovative, strategic, help me, John.
It was the idea of strategic risk or
Strategic risk. I think these guys
Yeah,
are thinking outside the box. I feel like I think that was a real challenge the Baldridge people gave us, and I've been thinking about it, and I agree with them. And I think they deserve some kudos if they're thinking creatively. But I wanted to start with a positive. You're going to a meeting, you said confrontation. I think they need additional funding. Okay. That's not confrontational. You think they need additional funding? I do. I think all of us could come to some agreement that they need, especially now. That doesn't sound confrontational. We are partners with you. Hell, we run a welcome center, and we could never get any money out of tourism. We tried a bunch of times, So I feel like there's a tremendous opportunity for us to compete for projects, and projects that only increase tourism get the money, and I think we do fine.
So Kevin, if I might, then your point is, which is counter to the idea I was saying, and that's fine, which is that in your view, all of the increase should go to the CVB in one form or one pocket or another, and that we, Pinehurst, to the degree we wanted funds, we would be able to compete pretty well with grant requests to get some money back from this. Whereas I was suggesting that I would like to see us, in control directly of at least some portion of the funds to do it as we can, but still within the guidelines of the legislation.
Yeah, John, I trust you, so you in control wouldn't concern me. I think you would abide by any guidelines. But we got to understand, if this turns into a cowboy mentality, and then the branding is gone on these projects where this money's flowing, and we start losing this central branding, I get a little concerned. I think there's a way to do it with the central branding under control. And the reason I didn't mean to oppose your way, just when you read the enabling legislation, I just feel like that's impossible. Okay? So it's just my interpretation of the enabling legislation is the people that are accountable for those tourism dollars is that tourism board. And so I don't think there's a situation where we're ever going to be accountable. Even if we spend it right, they're going to get the credit. If we spend it bad, they're going to get the negative, and I don't think we ever will. So I just think the devil's in the details. But I think I'm saying I'm for the 6%. This is a very complicated train that has to be managed well. You're going to get some answers, Jeff, and you're going to get a lot of the answers to the questions I have, and I think that's great. And I think the innovation and the strategic risk that's going on here makes a lot of sense. And competition has done nothing but make me a better business. I think it will do nothing but make us more innovative and thoughtful in how we approach and create strategic assets to, the pedestrian aspect. To me, do we really have a tourism related way for tourists to, I could see a Midland Road bike path benefiting Southern Pines and Pinehurst. It might not be about individual triumphs by municipalities. It might be regional triumphs that we're supporting collectively. I love this. I kind of like the idea. I get a little scared about the money lot, and I'm concerned about the control. I didn't like the terminology, a small group makes decisions. Did you see that you wrote? You did see it because you wrote it. And then the larger group just proves it. That means a small group is literally presenting the ideas in a bigger group, and that's a little concerning to me. I just think we got to think more dynamic. I think I like how Tom Passley thinks dynamically. I like how Tom Beto thinks dynamically. There's something here, but I think that anytime we go in there saying we want to control something that other parties responsible for, I feel like that's a losing battle. But I do think that we have things they should fund. So that's what you're saying, right, Jeff?
Certainly. It's part of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think, I mean,
But Jeff, okay, folks, we've been at this for a little over an hour. I think we need to give some direction.
to talk.
We need to give some direction to Jeff here.
I've got two more comments.
Judy, please, go ahead. Please,
Yeah.
Judy.
So all the money they have is 1.8 million, is that right?
Right now,
Yes,
well, they had 1.8 million, for example, in 2018.
Right, now it's 1.4.
2020, it was 1.4 million.
that's accurate.
So that is not a lot of money. That is
That's not
not a lot of money.
No.
And it's shameful. And so, you know, we can fuss about it. And so should they get 6%? I completely agree with Kevin. One other thing I'd say is that, you know, they could have a competition for some funds for people to do incremental investment. Be better if it were collaboration, you know, like a bike path down Midland Road or whatever. But also, I think they should consider an umbrella co-op program where this is going to be the Uber campaign. And then Aberdeen, here's how you play in it. Pinehurst, you can play in it this way. Southern Pines, you can play in it this way. And then you've got rotation going all the time, and you've got a bit of a different emphasis, town by town by town. So I think, you know, I'm not going to tell them how to spend their money, but, you know, there's lots of ways to skin this cat. And 1.8 million is not, we spent more money talking about this tonight than they've got to use. So.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go to the bank on this number, but I think Myrtle Beach spends 30 million.
Oh, it's a big difference between.
So I mean, I'm just trying to give you guys some perspective. We're not in the game.
Yeah, and I'm sure the resort is doing its own advertising on its own dime, its own media spend, but a $1.8 million media spend ain't nothing.
Yeah. Well, there's no reason, there's no reason to be against the 3% increase, because again, it's not coming out of our individual pockets. I don't think there's any argument, or shouldn't be any way about that. Just a question of how it gets allocated, in my view, and what we should do. I think, Jeff, remind me now, the views of Southern Pines and Aberdeen, you're going to be with them next week, I guess you said. But are they looking at this idea of trying to get some funds directly for themselves out of this pie, or are they into the pot and the grant idea?
As I've said before,
Yeah.
it's pretty clear based on what we heard at the Tri-Cities meeting that both boards, Aberdeen and Southern Pines, have already decided that their stance is they're going to push for a direct funding solution.
And I don't favor that. I just, I agree with Judy. Judy and Kevin are saying it better than I do, but than I'm saying, but it is so competitive. And I congratulate Phil Wirtz for doing what he's done with the money he has. He has tried to be so creative, but the little money he has only goes so far. And, another thing Tom Beto mentioned to me is the walking tour that we've been talking about. That's not listed as an example, but that's another thing that they might possibly fund. But go ahead, John.
But Lydia, if that's important, if those things are important, then it's a lot cleaner, a lot more efficient if we have some funds coming to us, in my opinion, that we can do those things with without having to go, to the grant. So,
But John, I think you start chipping
I
away
understand
at-
the big pot idea, which is Kevin has mentioned that we talked about a little bit earlier today.
No.
I understand that and trying to get it to that.
No, you're not hearing me right. I think we deserve funds for that project, but it might have branding on the bottom that send people to the home of golf. So we're promoting the entire destination. In other words, our successes helps the entire region. That's how tourism works. Tourism works in a region differently. It's not about us individuals, but our individuals, like Pinehurst individual success, on the CVB website, on the bottom, you can click and get to the other tourism destinations too. So I think we got to get to the point as municipalities that each other's successes just drives the other one higher, and so.
Well, here's what I think. I think that unless there is an articulated, explanation for how a big one pot of all the 6% is somehow better, I'm in favor of each of the towns getting some money to spend themselves, to the extent that they can, obviously under the supervision of the CVB. But so I go along with what Jeff's recommending.
All right, the county's gonna look at this on March 10th. Does it make sense to ask Tom Beto or Phil or Pashley or somebody to come in to a work session 2 weeks from tonight to answer these questions?
Jeff's meeting with him. We're helping Jeff in his meeting.
Yeah, Jeff,
Jeff's gonna do it.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm
My-
clear,
my-
I'm not against this. You guys have said I want one big fund. That's not what I said. I
I
said,
didn't mean, yeah.
I said this is innovative, and this is I like the innovation that they're throwing in here and the strategic risk. That'll be my line for the year.
I think we get it, Kevin. I think.
No, but someone said that I'm in for the 6% going in just one pot. I think this tourism development fund idea is a good one. It's a matter of what amount, because the 1.8 million is insignificant. And,
Okay.
and
So you're
Yeah,
basically
yeah.
going along with Jeff's recommendation.
I think
As am I, after having tried to explore the ins and outs of it.
I didn't understand the split. Like there's 1% them and 1% municipalities. I didn't understand that.
Right, but
And maybe the split isn't the right split either. Maybe that's where we search for common ground. That's not the right split. It's something that's, maybe it's a 0.5% that comes to municipalities, or maybe,
Maybe it all does if on projects that qualify.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep a more open mind and trying to understand the details here. And then I did want to make one point, because I know that I'm being shushed a lot tonight. I think maybe our uncomfortableness is the lack of diversity on their board, meaning they're all hoteliers, and so I think if they're going to think dynamically, maybe in this grant program, it has maybe a more dynamic,
a different representation.
I wanted to make that point to you, Jeff, because I
kinda
think
wanted
that
that
might be what makes everybody uncomfortable, that we got no say in the table.
Yeah.
I think that, I could recognize a good project for Southern Pines that would help us. I think you can, Jeff, and I think that might be the uncomfortable factor for me when I look at this document. And it might, I'm guessing that it might be yours as well. I'm not sure, but I wanted to make that point because you're meeting with them.
Yeah.
I do think that we're trying to slice the salami a little too thinly. I think that we are better off having a whopping 2.8 million and trying to figure out how to use that money together. The CVB, has more marketing prowess than we do as a jurisdiction. Yes, there are certain things that we know that we want to bring to the table, but I'd love for them to figure out how to be the catalyst for this, for our community. I think that logically should serve us better with our active participation, maybe on the boards or whatever, but to figure out what are the right things that we can all build together and bring more tourism to our community. With this
Maybe not.
I like that idea. I think that's a good idea. And that's kind of the umbrella I think you mentioned a few minutes ago, Judy. Would that be a way to describe that? Get some more people under the umbrella, and maybe that's the best instruction we can give to Jeff. Something like this: you're going to try to find common ground. You've already said that, Jeff. Maybe this idea of better representation on the board helps to assure that funds would be allocated appropriately, but also spread around to a variety of projects that would seem to benefit the whole of the county.
Mm-hmm.
But wait, I'm only talking about the Tourism Development Project Board. I'm not talking about the Tourism Board. I don't know if that is a.
You're talking about the committee that makes the recommendation.
Yeah. I don't think that the other ones are listed. So that makes sense. But I thought that was a reasonable, not a negative thought. we're all in this together.
Mhm, mhm,
And,
mhm.
I'm trying to make sure we put you in a better position when you talk,
Yeah.
we're all in this together, but, I think we compete well for anything that needed to be funded that was tourism related. So I really don't have a problem with us competing. I'm not scared of it. And I think some of those formulas eliminate people competing and we could end up wasting tourism dollars.
Right.
Yeah, I'm scared. I don't want to waste anything.
Yeah, I understand how that is a concern. The dollars might not, they might be used for tourism-related expenses, but maybe in ways that are not productive for the whole overall. So maybe with these sort of ideas, Jeff, you're armed with some additional arrows for your quiver, and the discussions are early next week, and then we would expect to come back to us at the next work session and or even.
I think I'm gonna be caught in the crossfire, that's what I think.
They're in your quiver, not the others.
Is that your well enough?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
can somebody come back with the information they gave us last year about how grossly underfunded our tourism? It's the numbers they gave us last June, whatever that meeting was that John and I sat in on, where they gave,
Was this at the CBB meeting or?
it was a board meeting. It's when I gave the presentation on Landmark, and then it was when we were first getting into COVID.
Yeah.
And they were talking about how other state legislatures were giving money to tourism for advertising tourism, but North Carolina wasn't giving anything, and that put us at a disadvantage.
Can I just make one additional observation? I've heard a lot from both you and Kevin, and you're close. Both of you are closer to this topic and this conversation than the rest of us probably are. So it's good to hear. But a lot of what of the deficit that you're describing, maybe most of it, maybe all of it, is about advertising and marketing.
Why? I'm thinking it was in that context.
How we're outclassed, and you have to be creative out there in the marketing world and being digital, and it's all about advertising dollars. And the proposal that the managers put together doesn't differ from the CVB's proposal and what gets spent on advertising.
Well, advertising gets that other 1%, right? Promotion, and then it's the other 2% that we're debating.
They only get,
Which is not advertising, it's
The product, it's the
other tourism related expenses.
Right.
But I thought you said all 3% was really getting spent on the promotion part.
Right now,
Not
it's
on the
1%.
right now, currently the 3% is being used all for advertising.
Yes.
right.
Their
right.
proposal is to add 1% to that. Our proposal is to add 1%.
So
we're just-
4% be used.
I agree. I think I'm disagreeing with tourism.
Yeah. You think it should be higher?
I find that incredible
Yeah.
that I
It's too-
want
it's-
tourism to have more money than they're
Too
asking.
little.
And I find that fascinating. So I think that's the first question. Why do they think they only need 800,000 when I know they're underfunded?
Well, if they go from 1.4 and add 600, that's 2 million, but it's still
Yeah.
not a whole lot of money.
It's not.
Yeah, and maybe 1.5 solves it for me, instead of 2%. I mean, I'm just saying, it feels like we're raising it 3% and not gaining anything. And then I don't question a bit that their staff gives us advertising. Now, the staff costs that are in there. I mean, because right now it's all human capital making all that digital work. And so I think that is real ad spending, that staff. Whereas you get bloated and it becomes a diminishing return. So I count their staff as ad spending in digital media world. I mean, we know how hard that is. And I mean, they're doing bootstrap stuff. They're shooting their own video. They got their own videographer posting video.
Everybody does that.
Yeah, that's
I know,
not.
but I don't know if they all have it on staff.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think you need to understand what the marketing mix is that they're proposing.
Yeah.
Be done with this money so that we understand what they're doing, what that landscape looks like. And then if they were to put up some money for each individual jurisdiction, what might be the things that we would do that would help magnify their spend. That's what I worry about, frittering away, the tyranny of little numbers, one of your favorite phrases, Jeff.
I love it.
There's just not enough money here to give a little bit here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
There's there's no impact.
Okay, well, I think we've given Jeff some good information here. I know he's absorbed it all, and I'm sure the other town managers will have some additional feedback. So I think it's time to have Jeff absorb what we've said, and I think there's a lot of interesting concepts here that thankfully hopefully we'll get to the right end. And you'll come back and then talk to us in 2 weeks' time, because the March 10th meeting of the board, the commissioners rather, will be coming up right after that.
Wear a flak jacket.
Well, not to our meeting, but
Sorry, Jeff, I really am. You're in a
Big
tough spot.
donuts.
Because you're looking after our interests. You're looking after our interests really hard. It's just this tourism thing is the thing that lays the golden egg, and I think we're not respecting it enough. I'm not sure.
okay. Let's look at other work to do here at the work session. Again, Jeff was good enough to supply the list of topics for some forthcoming meetings. Some will be regular meeting issues, I think, all very important markers along the way with the budget, for example, other things coming up on that. So that's good. I wanted to spend a few minutes anyway on just confirming the meeting with the Planning and Zoning Board for February 18. That's the date that Cindy and I discussed, excuse me. And to be late in the day, we hadn't actually agreed whether it's 4 or 4:30, but on that day, February 18, this will be a virtual meeting, of course. What are we comfortable with? Is it 4:30? Is it 4 o'clock? Anybody have any conflicts that afternoon that would prevent you from participating?
Well, how long is it going to be?
Really long.
I think that we'll probably need to set some limits on that. But there's
Earlier as possible, 4:30 then.
Yeah, I wouldn't say any later than 4:30. I think that's the comfortable side, and maybe even 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
But the date's clear for everybody. It's allegedly clear for most of the planning board, and I know they're looking forward to that. So maybe I'll better set the date or the time rather at 4 o'clock.
Sure.
Jeff, I think that's what the planning board actually did. Now, among the things that they want to hear from us, and this is I think for Darren to be part of, Jeff, is the issues surrounding the moratorium and the small area plans. They're going to be very interested in that as part of their education process. And that's kind of one of the specific topics that Cindy's mentioned they want to hear about. And they seem to be interested, they don't seem to be, they are interested in how they sort of work a work project or a study groups can work within the context of the open meetings laws. And I think there's some different ideas for that. Cindy has, Jules Latham had some thoughts, which you've seen today in a memo that she wrote and some responses back for me. So I think that's important as well. And I think they'd be looking for some specific project ideas if we want to pursue that with them. And I think that Darren has some suggestions on that. Jane, in fact, has talked to Darren over the last week, even this week, on ideas for projects that the Planning and Zoning Board might wish to pursue. Some of that has to do with the office professional areas, maybe zone 5, but things that they could begin to chip away on. So that's a sort of, I guess, a picture of what I see the meeting to be, and then certainly the interest the planning board has had in setting it up so far. Any suggestions or comments or questions further on that? Okay. Are there any other work session suggestions that anybody wants to put on the table now for discussion at forthcoming meetings from the council? Jeff?
Are you
Okay.
calling for my comment, John?
Yeah, if you have some other suggestions for specifically for work session topics beyond what your list of very specific issues was this afternoon.
Oh, no, I don't. I did give some thought to that this afternoon, but if I had them, I would have put them on this agenda.
Okay.
list.
All right. And council members, any other work session topics you want us to record for the future?
You know, John, I had mentioned marketing downtown, but after what we heard last week with the Park Service, I mean, the input we got on that, I think we're going to need to hear more about opportunities, and it might help us formulate our thoughts about marketing downtown. So I think we hold off on that a little bit.
Okay, and I think on that point, that was one of the follow-up points that Lydia and I and Natalie discussed earlier this week in a kind of a rehash of all the things we learned in last week's NPS discussions. And we're expected to get, I think, and I hope, some suggestions pretty soon about how other areas have marketed their landmark status or what they've done to market themselves. So yes, that would be a very good input to that.
Yeah, and I would add to the work session, all those, the grants that, the links we got on all the grants that we can get, that maybe we need to, in our work session, deal with that and better communicate that. I mean, you know how that seemed to be an issue, and we got that information. Someone got it forwarded to them. The different. Did we send it out to us, Natalie, or did you just get it?
Is Natalie on the line with us still?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm still here.
I think actually that's a good point.
That should be
When we get some information back from the Park Service about marketing on the one hand, or the grant process on the other, that would be a work session discussion, how we could take that.
I heard a grant on marketing too.
Yeah.
Which was kind of shocking. I didn't know that.
Ellen and I are trying, Ellen Rankin and I are trying to do a follow-up call, I think tomorrow afternoon, if we can get that scheduled. So I will make sure we get the links. I think they pulled them up in one of the meetings. It's the benefits of the NHL designation.
I'm saying put it on
with the grants.
The work session.
Right.
I'm not trying to challenge you to get it done this week.
Oh, no, I understand. Yeah, and just get the information together and kind of give council an update and education kind of what that is.
Yeah, I think the public would benefit from that.
Gotcha. Okay, can do.
Good.
We do anything ceremonial for the capital fund closeout for the community center?
Brooke would love that. Brooke would love that. She's been trying to get that thing closed for many
All of our hard hats.
Yeah.
Turn our hard hats in?
You better hold on. We better hold on to our hard hats. They might be needed.
Yeah, we're
elsewhere
gonna
across
need
the
them.
town.
We're gonna need the hard hat.
Yeah.
But,
So Judy, that's a reception at Judy's house to celebrate the,
I'll bring Kirby.
Outside.
Which one of Judy's houses?
yeah.
Only one.
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you, John, and Lydia, and everybody's comments on the historic. I didn't have anything to say. I just tried to reinforce. And Jeff, I thought your point was great. I thought you guys did a great job. I almost didn't say anything, but I wanted to reinforce what you said and just say it a different way. And that was all I did, because you guys did such a great job. And I love the, how that went. And I appreciate, how you guys I thought it was very positive. And
Thank you, Jeff.
and the one thing that you left out is, I think they're benefiting from this. We're talking about how the public's benefiting, how we're benefiting. I think they're benefiting from that, on how to nuance of this relationship and understand that it was both sides, need to work on it. And I feel very confident they are. And I was very appreciative of their, of that.
Yep.
Anyway,
Yeah, it was very happy news to hear we aren't going to have a label to look forward to.
Yeah, yeah,
Relatable.
yeah. I think that was positive. It just seems like we're trying to get through this together. I don't remember that. I don't remember that occurring. You know?
Yeah.
So I was very excited by that.
Indeed, yeah. Well, and we'll have more, we'll have the opportunity as a council, individually, collectively, to have more input with them as time goes along. And I think they are benefiting from that, and I know we are as well. I mentioned earlier, I had one other thought that came out of the Baldridge review last week that actually Kevin and I did touch on a little earlier, and it's for another topic for future discussion. But it goes like this. We recall in the Baldridge presentation and summary last week that one of our weaknesses had to do with how we reach out to the business community. And we have all of our activities centered around the council and the staff, but what are we doing with residents and visitors and the business community? And so, this is a critical time in our business community life, our small businesses, as we continue to operate in COVID, continue to operate in the winter, but in any month. And it seems that we need to have a structure of some sort to organize with, have input to the business community. And I'm going to spend some time with Kevin thinking through how we can better do that. And right to the point of, what can we do to help point the business community and to some of these support programs, the PPP program that's available, and if they're able to take advantage of that. So it's just a thought that had come up, and it gets into our marketing, which Lydia mentioned earlier, and we'll try to develop some themes on that as we go along. But I thought I'd spend some time with Kevin on what kind of a structure can we have. I know Jeff Batten has got some ideas about this. I'm sure Natalie and Jeff Sanborn as well.
It seems like just who applied and who didn't. I'd be happy to help them. I just feel like banks are reaching out on PPP. So I think that's automated because the banks are kind of doing it. I mean, one business had a bank call from out west to help them out because he heard a story that he was having problems. So it seems like that's working, but there's some smaller programs that are not marketed well, like the year program for rent support for a few months. So that was one of those blinding glimpses of the obvious. That's what I call things that, gosh, probably should have thought of long ago. Could have supported them easily. We were thinking in the early stages, I was thinking, gosh, no one really had a web store to promote. And I thought that was weird. We couldn't promote anything web-wise because very few stores, some did. But we maybe should have shifted gears towards support mechanism on PPP. I was a little too busy trying to survive at that probably. But if you would have asked me the question, I would have jumped in. I offered to help Alan. Anybody that asked for my help, I offered to help. And I think that, there's still PPP money out there. So is there somebody out there that didn't apply for it? Maybe there's a sense of urgency maybe on that one.
Yeah, on that there
I
is.
would, John, I would suggest that you guys are talking to maybe give Linda Parsons a call at the Chamber of Commerce, because I know that they have been sending out information about PPE programs to chamber members. Now, I do recognize that not all businesses are
As a
chamber
matter of
members.
fact,
Since you mentioned it, Natalie, it's been 2 weeks now, I guess. Linda.
3
Lydia and I
weeks.
had a discussion with Linda Parsons because I was interested to know what the Moore County Chamber is doing to try to assist its members with support and direction and help for some of these programs. What they do and what they're really only able to do is to send out every bit of information that comes out. There's been one over the past week or so about small grants from the state and the PPP program federally and all of that. So that's what the Chamber of Commerce is doing. But of course, the store owners and the landlords have to take it to the next step. And it's
Gotcha.
getting it to that next step where I think we might find some volunteers in the community that could be helpful, even such as Kevin suggested on his own tonight could happen. So Linda Parsons is definitely part of that. And it's a question of getting it through and finding a way to help the retailer, help the restaurateur get it to the bank or get it filed or whatever, and when they don't have a lot of time to do that. So we'll see how that develops, but it's a broader idea too about outreach to the business community. And I would just tie into that to date anyway, touch wood, you know, our retailers and our restaurants have done remarkably well, still suffering, but remarkably well through a very, very difficult time. And if you look around at some of the new stores that are coming here or those that are moving from one facility to the other, it's very impressive. And I just want to make sure that whatever we can do as a council and as a staff to encourage that and assist them in appropriate ways, but not get overly involved. That's one of our roles as a council to do, to encourage that and reward that activity with all the help that we can give them that's natural to do.
I mean, you got Judy, you got your shoe store.
I know.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
asking for that. And Potpourri has a new owner. He owns the shoe store. You got the
And
bank
it's-
building.
Yep.
I mean, it looks like there's something dynamic going on, but you got to look. I
And
know
the chocolate company.
everybody doesn't see it, but I don't know. I feel like there's a second wave happening in Pinehurst.
Yeah.
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 Well, I
Yeah.
think definitely the USGA announcement, you know, put a lot of hope into a lot of these retailers and merchants. You know,
Yeah.
even though it's going to be tough for 2021, maybe they see a future there. So that's also very positive.
Okay. Well, I think that concludes our work of the work session. Just remind you that we have tomorrow night on the
6
small
o'clock.
plans, and then February 18 with the Planning and Zoning Board. And unless there's objection, I will move to adjourn the work session. Thank you all for your hard work. I'm sure we'll be talking and seeing each other tomorrow.
Thanks, John.
John.
Thank you.
Thank you.